Feats on the Fiord. Everyone who has looked at the map of Norway must have been struck with the singular character of its coast on the map. It looks so jagged, a strange mixture of land and sea on the spot. However, this coast is very sublime. The long straggling promontories are mountainous, towering ridges of rock springing up in precipices from the water, while the bays between them, instead of being rounded with shelving sandy shores, on which the sea tumbles its waves as in bays of our coast, are in fact long narrow valleys filled with sea, instead of being laid out in fields and meadows. The high rocky banks shelter these deep bays called fjords from almost every wind, so that their waters are usually as still as those of a lake for days and weeks together. They reflect each separate treetop of the pine forests, which clothe the mountain sides, the mirror being broken only by the leap of some sportive fish or the oars of the boatman, as he goes to inspect the seafall from islet to islet of the fjord, or carries out his nets or his rod to catch the sea trout or char or cod or herrings, which abound in their seasons on the coast of Norway. It is difficult to say whether these fjords are the most beautiful in summer, or in winter. In summer they glitter with golden sunshine, and purple and green shadows from the mountain and forest lie on them, and these may be more lovely than the faint light of the winter noons of those latitudes, and the snowy pictures of frozen peaks, which then show themselves on the surface. But before the day is half over, out come the stars, the glorious stars, which shine like nothing that we have ever seen there. The planets cast a faint shadow, as the young moon does with us and these planets, and the constellations of the sky, as they silently glide over from peak to peak of these rocky passes, are imaged on the waters so clearly that the fisherman, as he unmoors his boat for his evening task, feels as if he were about to shoot forth his vessel into another heaven and to cleave his way among the stars. Still as everything is to the eye sometimes for 100 miles together along these deep sea valleys, there is rarely silence. The ear is kept awake by 1,000 voices. In the summer there are cataracts leaping from ledge to ledge of the rocks, and there is the bleating of the kids that browse there, and the flap of the great eagle's wings as it dashes abroad from its eyrie, and the cries of whole clouds of seabirds, which inhabit the islets, and all these sounds are mingled and multiplied by the strong echoes, till they become a din as loud as that of a city. Even at night, when the flocks are in the fold, and the birds at roost, and the echoes themselves seem to be asleep, there is occasionally a sweet music heard, too soft for even the listening ear to catch. By day, there is the rumble of some avalanche, as after a drifting storm a mass of snow too heavy to keep its place slides and tumbles from the mountain peak. Wherever there is a nook between the rocks on the shore, where a man may build a house and clear a field or two river, there is a platform beside the cataract where the sawyer may plant his mill and make a path from it to join some great road. There is a human habitation, and the sounds that belong to it. Thence in winter nights come music and laughter, and the tread of dancers, and the hum of many voices. The Norwegians are a social and hospitable people, and they hold their gay meetings, in defiance of their Arctic climate, through every season of the year. On a January night 100 years ago, there was great merriment in the house of a farmer who had fixed his abode within the Arctic Circle in Nordland, not far from the foot of Sulitama, the highest mountain in Norway. This dwelling, with its few fields about it, was in a recess between the rocks on the shore of the fjord, about 5 miles from Saltdalen, and 2 miles from the junction of the Saltens Elv River with the fjord. The occasion on the particular January day mentioned above was the betrothment of one of the housemaidens to a young farm servant of the establishment. It was merely an engagement to be married. But this engagement is a much more formal and public affair in Norway, and indeed wherever the people belong to the Lutheran Church, than with us. According to the rites of the Lutheran Church, there are 2 ceremonies when a couple become engaged, and another when they are married. As Madame Erlingson had 2 daughters growing up, and they were no less active than the girls of a Norwegian household, usually, she had occasion for only 2 maidens to assist in the business of the dwelling and the dairy. Of these 2, the younger Erika was the maiden betrothed today. No one perhaps rejoiced so much at the event as her mistress, both for Erika's sake, and on account of her own 2 young daughters. Erika was not the best companion for them, and the servants of a Norwegian farmer are necessarily the companions of the daughters of the house. There was nothing wrong in Erika's conduct or temper towards the family, but she had sustained a shock which hurt her spirits and increased a weakness which she owed to her mother. Her mother, a widow, had brought up her child in all the superstitions of the country, some of which remain in full strength even to this day, and were then very powerful, and the poor woman's death at last confirmed the lessons of her life, She had stayed too long one autumn day at the Erlingsons, and, being benighted on her return, and suddenly seized and bewildered by the cold, had wandered from the road, and was found frozen to death in a recess of the forest, which it was surprising that she should have reached. Erica never believed that she did reach this spot of her own accord. Having had some fears before of the wood demon having been offended by one of the family, Erica regarded this accident as a token of his vengeance. She said this when she first heard of her mother's death, and no reasonings from the zealous pastor of the district, no soothing from her mistress, could shake her persuasion. She listened with submission, wiping away her quiet tears as they discoursed, but no one could ever get her to say that she doubted whether there was a wood demon, or that she was not afraid of what he would do if offended. Erlingson and his wife always treated her superstition as a weakness, and when she was not present, they ridiculed it, yet they saw that it had its effect on their daughters. Erica most strictly obeyed their wish, that she should not talk about the spirits of the region with Orga and Frolic, but the girls found plenty of people to tell them what they could not learn from Erica, besides what everybody knows who lives in the rural districts of Norway about Nipen, the spirit that is always so busy after everybody's affairs about the water sprite, an acquaintance of everyone who lives beside a river, or lake, and about the mountain demon familiar to all who lived so near Sulitlma. Besides these common spirits, the girls used to hear of a multitude of others, from old Petter the blind houseman, and from all the farm people down to Otto the herd boy. Their parents hoped that this taste of theirs might die away if once Erica, with her sad, serious face and subdued voice, were removed to a house of her own, where they would see her supported by her husband's unfearing mind, and occupied with domestic business more entirely than in her mistress' house. So Madame Erlingson was well pleased that Erica was betrothed. For this marrying, however, the young people must wait. There was no house or houseman's place vacant for them. At present the old houseman Petter, who had served Erlingson's father, and Erlingson himself for 58 years, could now no longer do the weekly work on the farm, which was his rent for his house field. And cow, he was blind, and old his aged wife Ulla could not leave the house, and it was the most she could do to keep the dwelling in order, with occasional help from one and another houseman who make this sort of contract with farmers in Norway, are never turned out. They have their dwelling and field for their own life, and that of their wives. What they do when disabled is to take in a deserving young man to do their work for the farmer, on the understanding that he succeeds to the houseman's place. On the death of the old people, Petter and Ulla had made this agreement with Erica's lover Rolf, and it was understood that his marriage with Erica should take place whenever the old people should die. It was impossible for Erica herself to fear that Nipen was offended at the outset of this festival day. If he had chosen to send a wind, the guests could not have come, for no human frame can endure traveling in a wind in Nordland on a January day happily. The air was so calm that a flake of snow or a lock of eiderdown would have fallen straight to the ground at 2 o'clock when the short daylight was gone. The stars were shining so brightly that the company who came by the Fiord would be sure to have an easy voyage. Erlingson and some of his servants went out to the porch on hearing music from the water, and stood with lighted pine torches to receive their guests. When approaching from behind, they heard the sound of the sleigh bells, and found that company was arriving both by sea and land. Glad had the visitors been whether they came by land or water to arrive in sight of the lighted dwelling, whose windows looked like rows of yellow stars, contrasting with the blue ones overhead, and more glad still were they to be ushered into the great room, where all was so light, so warm, so cheerful. Warm it was to the farthest corner, and too warm near the roaring and crackling fires, for the fires were of pine wood. Rows upon rows of candles were fastened against the walls above the heads of the company. The floor was strewn with juniper twigs, and the spinning wheels, the carding boards, every token of household labor was removed, except a loom which remained in one corner. In another corner was a welcome sight, a platform of rough boards 2 feet from the floor, and on it 2 stools. This was a token that there was to be dancing, and indeed Otto the herd boy, old Petter's grandson, was seen to have his clarionet in his belt as he ran in and out on the arrival of fresh parties. In the porch she found Otto. The whole company walked about the large room, sipping their strong coffee, and helping one another to the good things on the trays which were carried round. When these trays disappeared, Otto was seen to reach the platform with a hop, skip, and jump, followed by a dull-looking young man with a violin. The oldest men lighted their pipes and sat down to talk 2 or 3 together. Others withdrew to a smaller room where cartables were set out, while the younger men selected their partners. The dance was led by the blushing Erica, whose master was her partner, it had never occurred to her that she was not to take her usual place. And she was greatly embarrassed, not the less so that she knew that her mistress was immediately behind with Rolf for her partner. All the women in Norway dance well, being practiced in it from their infancy. Every woman present danced well, but none better than Erica. Very well, very pretty, very good, observed the pastor Roman 1000 Carlsen, as he sat with his pipe in his mouth. Looking on, there are many youths in Trondheim that would be glad of so pretty a partner as Roman 1000 Erlingson, as if she would not look so frightened. Did you say she looks frightened, sir? Asked Petter. Yes, when does she not? Some ghost from the grave has scared her. I suppose it is her great fault, that she has so little faith. I never met with such a case. I hardly know how to conduct it. I must begin with the people about her, abolish their superstitions, and then there may be a chance for her. Pray, sir, who plays the violin at this moment? Said Petter. A fellow who looks as if he did not like this business. He is frowning with his red brows, as if he would frown out the lights. His red brows, oh, then it is Hund. I was thinking it would be hard upon him, poor fellow, if he had to play tonight, yet not so hard, as if he had to dance. It is weary work dancing with the heels, when the heart is too heavy to move. You may have heard, sir, for everyone knows it, that Hund wanted to have young Rolf's place. And some say Erica herself. Is she dancing, sir, if I may ask? Yes, with Rolf. What sort of a man is Rolf with regard to these superstitions? I mean, is he as foolish as Eric, always frightened about something? No, indeed, it is to be wished that Rolf was not so light, as he is so inconsiderate about these matters. Rolf has his troubles and his faults, but they are not of that kind. Enough, said Roman 1000 Carlsen with a voice of authority. I rejoice to hear that he is superior to the popular delusions. As to his troubles and his faults, they may be left for me to discover all in good time. With all my heart, sir, they are nobody's business, but his own and may be Erica's. How goes it? Rolf, said his master, who, having done his duty in the dancing room, was now making his way to the cartables in another apartment, to see how his guests there were entertained, thinking that Rolf looked very absent, as he stood in the pause of the dance in silence by Erica's side. Erlingson clapped him on the shoulder, and said, How goes it? Make your friends merry. Rolf bowed and smiled, and his master passed on. How goes it? Repeated Rolf to Erica, as he looked earnestly into her face. Is all going on well, Erica? Certainly, I suppose so. Why not? She replied. If you see anything wrong, anything omitted, be sure and tell me. Madame Erlingson would be very sorry. Is there anything forgotten, Rolf? I think you have forgotten what today is. That is all. Nobody that looked at you, love, would fancy it to be your own day. You look anything but merry. Oh, Erica, I wish you would trust me. I could take care of you and make you quite happy. If you would only believe it, nothing in the universe shall touch you to your hurt while. Oh, hush, hush, said Erica, turning pale, and red at the presumption of the speech. See, they are waiting for us one more round before supper. And in the whirl of the waltz, she tried to forget the last words Rolf had spoken, but they rang in her ears, and before her eyes were images of Nipon. Overhearing this, defiant seemed the water sprite planning vengeance in its palace under the ice, and the mountain demon laughing in scorn, till the echoes shouted Aganan the wood demon, waiting only for summer to see how he could beguile the rash lover. Long was the supper, and hearty was the mirth round the table. People in Norway have universally a hearty appetite, such an appetite as we English have no idea of. At last appeared the final dish of the long feast, the sweet cake with which dinner and supper in Norway usually conclude. It is the custom in the country regions of Norway to give the spirit Nipon a share at festival times. His Christmas cake is richer than that prepared for the guests, and before the feast is finished, it is laid in some place out of doors, where, as might be expected, it is never to be found in the morning. Everybody knew, therefore, why Rolf rose from his seat, though some were too far off to hear him say that he would carry out the treat for old Nipon. Now pray do not speak so, do not call him those names, said Erica anxiously. It is quite as easy to speak so as not to offend him. Pray, Rolf, to please me, do speak respectfully, and promise me to play no tricks, but just set the things down and come straight in, and do not look behind you. Promise me, Rolf. Rolf did promise, but he was stopped by two voices calling upon him. Otto, the herd boy, came running to claim the office of carrying out Nipon's cake. Erica eagerly put an alecken into his hand, and the cake under his arm, and Otto was going out, when his blind grandfather, hearing that he was to be the messenger, observed that he should be better pleased if it were somebody else, for Otto, though a good boy, was inquisitive, and apt to get into mischief by looking too closely into everything, having never thought of fear. Everybody knew this to be true, though Otto himself declared that he was as frightened as anybody. Sometimes, moreover, he asked what there was to pry into on the present occasion in the middle of the night, and appealed to the company whether Nipon was not best pleased to be served by the youngest of a party. This was allowed, and he was permitted to go when Petter's consent was obtained. The place where Nipon liked to find his offerings was at the end of the barn below the gallery, which ran round the outside of the building. There in the summer lay a plot of green grass, and in the winter, a sheet of pure frozen snow. Thither Otto shuffled on over the slippery surface of the yard. He looked more like a prowling cub than a boy, wrapped as he was in his wolfskin coat, and his foxskin cap doubled down over his. The cake steamed up in the frosty air under his nose, so warm and spicy and rich that Otto began to wonder what so very superior a cake could be like. He had never tasted any cake so rich as this, nor had anyone in the house tasted such, for Nipon would be offended if his cake was not richer than anybody's else. He broke a piece off and ate it, and then wondered whether Nipon would mind his cake being just a little smaller than usual. After a few steps more, the wonder was how far Nipon's charity would go, for the cake was now a great deal smaller, and Otto next wondered whether anybody could stop eating such a cake. When it was once tasted, he was surprised to see, when he came out into the starlight at the end of the barn, how small a piece was left. He stood listening whether Nipon was coming in a gust of wind, and when he heard no breeze stirring, he looked about for a cloud where Nipon might be. There was no cloud as far as he could see. The moon had set, but the stars were so bright as to throw a faint shadow from Otto's form upon the snow. There was no sign of any spirit being angry at present, but Otto thought Nipon would certainly be angry at finding so very small a piece of cake. It might be better to let the ale stand by itself, and Nipon would perhaps suppose that Madame Erlingson's stock of groceries had fallen short, at least, that it was in some way inconvenient to make the cake on the present occasion. So, putting down his can upon the snow, and holding the last fragment of the cake between his teeth, he seized a birch pole which hung down from the gallery, and by its help climbed one of the posts, and got over the rails into the gallery, whence he could watch what would happen. To remain on the very spot where Nipon was expected was a little more than he was equal to, but he thought he could stand in the gallery in the shadow of the broad eaves of the barn, and wait for a little while. He was so very curious to see Nipon, and to learn how it liked its ale. There he stood in the shadow, growing more and more impatient as the minutes passed on, and he was aware that he was wanted in the house once or twice. He walked slowly away, looking behind him, and then turned again, unwilling to miss this opportunity of seeing Nipon. Then he called the spirit, actually begged it to appear. His first call was almost a whisper, but he called louder and louder, till he was suddenly stopped by hearing an answer. The call he heard was soft and sweet. There was nothing terrible in the sound itself, yet Otto grasped the rail of the gallery with all his strength as he heard it. The strangest thing was it was not a single cry. Others followed it, all soft and sweet, but Otto thought that Nipon must have many companions, and he had not prepared himself to see more spirits than one. As usual, however, his curiosity grew more intense from the little he had heard, and he presently called again. He was answered by 4 or 5 voices in succession. "Was ever anybody so stupid?" cried the boy, now stamping with vexation. "It is the echo, after all, as if there was not always an echo here, opposite the rock. It is not Nipon at all. I will just wait another minute, however." He leaned in silence on his folded arms, and had not so waited for many seconds before he saw something moving on the snow at a little distance. It came nearer and nearer, and at last quite up to the can of ale. "I am glad I stayed," thought Otto. "Now I can say I have seen Nipon. It is much less terrible than I expected. Grandfather told me that it sometimes came like an enormous elephant or hippopotamus, and never smaller than a large bear. But this is no bigger than, let me see, I think it is most like a fox. I should like to make it speak to me. They would think so much of me at home if I had talked with Nipon." So he began gently as that Nipon. The thing moved its bushy tail, but did not answer. "There is no cake for you tonight, Nipon. I hope the ale will do. Is the ale good, Nipon?" Off went the dark creature, without a word, as quick as it could go. "It is offended," thought Otto, "or is it really what it looks like, a fox? If it does not come back, I will go down presently and see whether it is only a fox." He presently let himself down to the ground by the way he had come up, and eagerly laid hold of the ale. It would not stir. It was as fast on the ground as if it was enchanted, which Otto did not doubt was the case, and he started back with more fear than he had yet had the cold he felt on this exposed spot soon reminded him, however, that the can was probably frozen to the snow, which it might well be. After being brought warm from the fireside, it was so the vessel had sunk an inch into the snow, and was there fixed by the frost. None of the ale seemed to have been drunk, and so cold was Otto by this time that he longed for a sup of it. He took first a sup, and then a draught, and then he remembered that the rest would be entirely spoiled by the frost if it stood another hour. This would be a pity, he thought, so he finished it, saying to himself that he did not believe Nipon would come that night. At that very moment, he heard a cry so dreadful that it shot like sudden pain through every nerve of his body. It was not a shout of anger, it was something between a shriek and a wail, like what he fancied would be the cry of a person in the act of being murdered. That Nipon was here now he could not doubt. And at length Otto fled. He fled the faster at first for hearing the rustle of wings. But the curiosity of the boy even now got the better of his terror, and he looked up at where the wings were rustling there. He saw in the starlight the glitter of two enormous round eyes, shining down upon him from the ridge of the roof. But it struck him at once that he had seen those eyes. Before he checked, his speed stopped, went back a little, sprang up once more into the gallery, hissed, waved his cap, and clapped his hands, till the echoes were all awake again. And as he had hoped, the great white owl spread its wings, sprang off from the ridge, and sailed away over the Fiord. Otto tossed up his cap, cold as the night was. So delighted was he to have scared away the bird which had for a moment scared him. He hushed his mirth, however, when he perceived that lights were wandering in the yard, and that there were voices approaching. He saw that the household were alarmed about him, and were coming forth to search for him, curious to see what they would do. Otto crouched down in the darkest corner of the gallery to watch and listen. First came Rolf and his master, carrying torches, with which they lighted up the whole expanse of snow. As they came they looked round them without any fear, and Otto heard Rolf say, "If it were not for that cry, sir, I should think nothing of it, but my fear is that some beast has got him. Search first the place where the cake and ale ought to be," said Erlingson. "Till I see blood I shall hope the best." "You will not see that," said Hund, who followed his gloomy countenance, now distorted by fear, looking ghastly in the yellow light of the torch he carried. "You will see no blood. Nipon does not draw blood." "Never tell me that anyone that was not wounded and torn could send out such a cry as that," said Rolf. "Some wild brute seized him, no doubt, at the very moment that Erica and I were standing at the door listening." Otto repented of his prank when he saw in the flickering light behind the crowd of guests, who seemed to hang together like a bunch of grapes, the figures of his grandfather and Erica. The old man had come out in the cold for his sake, and Erica, who looked as white as the snow, had no doubt come forth because the old man wanted a guide. Otto now wished himself out of the scrape. Sorry as he was, he could not help being amused and keeping himself hidden a little longer when he saw Rolf discover the round hole in the snow where the can had sunk, and heard the different opinions of the company as to what this portended. Most were convinced that his curiosity had been his destruction, as they had always prophesied. What could be clearer by this hole than that the ale had stood there and been carried off with the cake, and Otto with it, because he chose to stay and witness what is forbidden to mortals. "I wonder where he is now," said a shivering youth, the gayest dancer of the evening. "Oh, there is no doubt about that, anyone can tell you that," replied the elderly and experienced Roman 1000 Hallberg. "He is chained upon a wind, poor fellow, like all Nipon's victims. He will have to be shut up in a cave all the hot summer through, when it is pleasantest to be abroad. And when the frost and snow come again, he will be driven out with a lash of Nipon's whip, and he must go flying wherever the wind flies, without resting or stopping to warm himself at any fire in the country." Otto had thus far kept his laughter to himself, but now he could contain himself no longer. He laughed aloud, and then louder and louder, as he heard the echoes all laughing with him. The faces below, too, were so very ridiculous, some of the people staring up in the air, and others at the rock, where the echo came from, some having their mouths wide open, others their eyes starting, and all looking unlike themselves in the torchlight. His mirth was stopped by his master. "Come down, sir," cried Erlingson, looking up at the gallery. "Come down this moment. We shall make you remember this night, as well perhaps as Nipon could do. Come down, and bring my can and the ale and the cake. The more pranks you play, the more you will repent it." Most of the company thought Erlingson very bold to talk in this way, but he was presently justified by Otto's appearance on the balustrade. His master seized him as he touched the ground, while the others stood aloof. "Where is my ale?" said Erlingson. "Here, sir," and Otto held it up, dangling by the handle. "And the cake? I bade you bring it down with you." "So I did, sir." And to his master's look of inquiry, the boy answered by pointing down his throat with one finger, and laying the other hand upon his stomach. "It is all here, sir. And the ale in the same place." Otto bowed and Erlingson turned away. Without speaking, he could not have spoken without laughing. "Bring this gentleman home," said Erlingson presently to Rolf, "and do not let him out of your hands. Let no one ask him any questions, till he is in the house." Rolf grasped the boy's arm, and Erlingson went forward to relieve Petter, though it was not very clear to him at the moment whether such a grandchild was better safe or missing. The old man made no such question, but hastened back with many expressions of thanksgiving. As the search party crowded in among the women, and pushed all before them into the large warm room, Roman 1000 Carlsen was seen standing on the stairhead, wrapped in the bearskin coverlid. "Is the boy there?" he inquired. Otto showed himself. "How much have you seen of Nijpenhay?" "Nobody ever had a better sight of it, sir. It was as plain as I see you now, and no farther off." "Nonsensate is a lie," said Roman 1000 Carlsen. "Do not believe a word he says," advised the pastor. Otto bowed, and proceeded to the great room where he took up his clarionet, as if it was a matter of course that the dancing was to begin again. Immediately he blew upon his fingers, however, observing that they were too stiff with cold to do their duty well, and, when he turned towards the fire, everyone made way for him in a very different manner from what they would have dreamed of 3 hours before. Otto had his curiosity gratified as to how they would regard one who was believed to have seen something supernatural. When seriously questioned, Otto had no wish to say anything but the truth, and he admitted the whole that he had eaten the entire cake, drunk all the ale, seen a fox and an owl, and heard the echoes in answer to himself. As he finished his story, Hund, who was perhaps the most eager listener of all, leaped thrice upon the floor, snapping his fingers. As if in a passion of delight, he met Erlingson's eye full of severity, and was quiet, but his countenance still glowed with exultation. The rest of the company were greatly shocked at these daring insults to Nijpen, and none more so than Petter. The old man's features worked with emotion, as he said in a low voice that he should be very thankful if all the mischief that might follow upon this adventure might be borne by the kin of him who had provoked it. If it should fall upon those who were innocent, never surely had boy been so miserable as his poor lad would then be. Otto's eyes filled with tears as he heard this, and he looked up at his master and mistress, as if to ask whether they had no word of comfort to say. "Neighbor," said Madame Erlingson to Petter, "is there anyone here who does not believe that God is over all, and that he protects the innocent? Is there anyone who does not feel," added Erlingson, "that the innocent should be gay safe, as they are in the goodwill of God and man? Come, Neighborsto, you're dancing again. You have lost too much time already. Now, Otto, play your bestand, you Hund." "I hope," said Otto, "that if any mischief is to come, it will fall upon me. Well, see how I shall bear it." When Roman 1000 Carlsen appeared the next morning, the household had so much of its usual air that no stranger would have imagined how it had been occupied the day before. The large room was fresh strewn with evergreen sprigs. The breakfast table stood at one end, where each took breakfast, standing immediately on coming downstairs. At the bottom of the room was a busy group. Petter was twisting strips of leather thin and narrow into whips. Rolf and Hund were silently intent upon a sort of work which the Norwegian peasant delights in, carving. Would they spoke only to answer Petter's questions about the progress of the work. Petter loved to hear about their carving, and to feel it, for he had been remarkable for his skill in the art as long as his sight lasted. The whole party rose when Roman 1000 Carlsen entered the room. He talked politics a little with his host by the fireside, in the midst of which conversation Erlingson managed to intimate that nothing would be heard of Nijpen today if the subject was let alone by themselves, a hint which the clergyman was willing to take, as he supposed it meant in deference to his views. Erika heard Roman 1000 Carlsen inquiring of Petter about his old wife, so she started up from her work, and said she must run and prepare Ulla for the pastor's visit. Poor Ulla would think herself forgotten this morning. It was growing so late, and nobody had been over to see her. Ulla, however, was far from having any such thoughts. There sat the old woman propped up in bed, knitting as fast as fingers could move, and singing with her soul in her song, though her voice was weak and unsteady. "I thought you would come," said Ulla. "I knew you would come and take my blessing on your betrothment. I must not say that I hope to see you crowned, for we all know and nobody so well as Ithat it is I that stand between you and your crown. I often think of it, my dear." "Then I wish you would not, Ulla, you know that." I do know it, my dear, and I would not be for hastening God's appointments. Let all be in his own time. There was news this morning, said Erica, of a lodgment of logs at the top of the fosse one, and they were all going except Petter to slide them down the gully to the Fiord. The gully is frozen so slippery that the work will not take long. They will make a raft of the logs in the Fiord, and either Rolf or Hund will carry them out to the islands when the tide ebbs. Will it be Rolf, do you think, or Hund, dear? I wish it may be Hund. If it be Rolf, I shall go with him. Oh, Ulla, I cannot lose sight of him. After what happened last night, did you hear? I do wish Otto would grow wiser. Ulla shook her head. How did Hund conduct himself yesterday? Did you mark his countenance, dear? Indeed, there was no helping it, any more than one can help watching a storm cloud as it comes up. So it was dark and wrathful, was it, that ugly face of his? There was a knock, and before Erica could reach the door, Frolic burst in. Such news, she cried, you never heard such news. Good or bad? Inquired Ulla. Oh, bad, very bad, declared Frolic. There is a pirate vessel among the islands. She was seen off Sorrow some time ago, but she is much nearer to us now. There was a farmhouse seen burning on Alton Fiord last week, and as the family are all gone and nothing but ruins left, there is little doubt the pirates lit the torch that did it, and the cod has been carried off from the beach in the few places where any has been caught yet. They have not found out our Fiord yet? Inquired Ulla. Oh dear, I hope not, but they may any day, and father says the coast must be raised from Hammerfest to Trondheim, and a watch set, till this wicked vessel can be taken or driven away. He was going to send a running message both ways, but there is something else to be done first. Another misfortune? Asked Erica faintly. No, they say it is a piece of very good fortune, least for those who like bear's feet for dinner. Somebody or other has lighted upon the great bear that got away in the summer, and poked her out of her den on the Fjelde. She is certainly abroad with her 2 last years' cubs, and their traces have been found just above near the fosse. Otto has come running home to tell us, and father says he must get up a hunt before more snow falls, and we lose the tracks, or the family may establish themselves among us, and make away with our first calves. Does he expect to kill them all? I tell you, we are all to grow stout on bear's feet. For my part, one like bear's feet, best on the other side of Trondheim. You will change your mind, Miss Frolic, when you see them on the table, observed Ulla. That is just what father said, and he asked how I thought Erica and Stiorna would like to have a den in their neighborhood when they got up to the mountain for the summer. Erica with a sigh rose to return to the house. In the porch she found Otto. Wooden dwellings resound so much as to be inconvenient for those who have secrets to tell. In the porch of Petter's house, Otto had heard all that passed within. Dear Erica, said he, I want you to do a very kind thing for me. Do get leave for me to go with Rolf after the bears. If I get one stroke at them, if I can, but wound one of them, I shall have a paw for my share, and I will lay it out for Nypen. You will not you? It must be as Erlingson chooses, Otto, but I fancy you will not be allowed to go just now. The establishment was now in a great hurry and bustle for an hour, after which time it promised to be unusually quiet. Roman 1000 Carlsen began to be anxious to be on the other side of the Fiord. It was rather inconvenient, as the 2 men were wanted to go in different directions, while their master took a third to rouse the farmers for the bear hunt. The hunters were all to arrive before night within a certain distance of the thickets, where the bears were now believed to be on calm nights. It was no great hardship to spend the dark hours in the bivouac of the country. Each party was to shelter itself under a bank of snow, or in a pit dug out of it, an enormous fire blazing in the midst, and brandy and tobacco being plentifully distributed on such occasions. Early in the morning, the director of the hunt was to go his rounds, and arrange the hunters in a ring, enclosing the hitting place of the bears, so that all might be prepared, and no waste made of the few hours of daylight which the season afforded. As soon as it was light enough to see distinctly among the trees or bushes or holes of the rocks, where the bears might be couched, they were to be driven from their retreat, and disposed of as quickly as possible. Such was the plan, well understood in such cases throughout the country. On the present occasion, it might be expected that the peasantry would be ready at the first summons, yet the more messengers and helpers the better, and Erlingson was rather vexed to see Hund go with alacrity to unmoor the boat, and offer officiously to row the pastor across the Fiord. His daughters knew what he was thinking about, and after a moment's consultation Frolic asked whether she and the maid Stiorna might not be the rowers. Nobody would have objected if Hund had not. The girls could row, though they could not hunt bears, and the weather was fair enough, but Hund shook his head, and when on preparing the boat his master spoke to him. But Hund was not remarkable for giving up his own way. He would only say that there would be plenty of time for both affairs, and that he could follow the hunt when he returned, and across the lake he went. Erlingson and Rolf presently departed. The women and Petter were left behind. They occupied themselves to keep away anxious thoughts. Old Petter sang to them 2 hour after hour. They looked for Hund his news of his voyage, and the sending him after his master would be something to do and to think of. But Hund did not come. Stiorna at last let fall that she did not think he would come yet, for that he meant to catch some cod before his return. He had taken tackle with him for that purpose, she knew, and she should not wonder if he did not appear till the morning. Everyone was surprised, and Madame Erlingson highly displeased at the time when her husband would be wanting every strong arm that could be mustered. His servant chose to be out fishing instead of obeying orders. The girls pronounced him a coward, and Petter observed that to a coward as well as a sluggard there was ever a lion in the path. Erica doubted whether this act of disobedience arose from cowardice, for there were dangers in the Fiord for such as went out as far as the cod she supposed Hund had heard. She stopped short as a sudden flash of suspicion crossed her mind. She had seen Hund inquiring of Olaf about the pirates, and his strange obstinacy about this day's boating looked much as if he meant to learn more. Danger in the Fiord, repeated Orga. Oh, you mean the pirates? They are far enough from our Fiord, I suppose. If ever they do come, I wish they would catch Hund and carry him off. I am sure we could spare them nothing. They would be so welcome to. Did not you see Roman 1000 Carlsen in the boat with Hund? Madame Erlingson inquired of Otto when he came in. No, Hund was quite alone, pulling with all his might down the Fiord. The tide was with him, so that he shot along like a fish. How do you know it was Hund that you saw? Don't I know our boat, and don't I know his pull? It is no more like Rolf's than Rolf's is like master's. Perhaps he was making for the best fishing ground as fast as he could. We shall see that by the fish he brings home. True, by supper time we shall know. Hund will not be home by supper time, said Otto decidedly. Why not come say out what you mean? Well, I will tell you what I saw. I watched him rowing as fast as his arm, and the tide would carry him. It was so plain that there was a plan in his head that I followed on from point to point, catching a sight now and then, till I had gone a good stretch beyond Salton Heights. I was just going to turn back when I took one more look, and he was then pulling in for the land. On the north shore or south? Asked Petter. The north, just at the narrow part of the Fiord, where one can see into the holes of the rocks opposite. The Fiord takes a wide sweep below there, observed Petter. Yes, and that was why he landed, replied Otto. He was then but a little way from the fishing ground if he had wanted fish, but he drove up the boat into a little cove, a narrow dark creek, where it will lie safe enough, I have no doubt, till he comes back, if he means to come back. And that vessel, he knew, was the pirate schooner. Why, where should he go? What should he do but come back? Asked Madame Erlingson. He is now gone over the ridge to the north. I saw him moor the boat and begin to climb, and I watched his dark figure on the white snow higher and higher till it was a speck, and I could not make it out. What do you think of this story, Petter? Asked his mistress. I think Hund has taken the short cut over the promontory on business of his own at the islands. He is not on any business of yours, depend upon it, madame. And what business can he have among the islands? I could say that with more certainty if I knew exactly where the pirate vessel is. That is your idea, Erica, said her mistress. I saw what your thoughts were an hour ago, before we knew all this. I was thinking then, madame, that if Hund was gone to join the pirates, Nipon would be very ready to give them a wind. Just now, a baffling wind would be our only defense, and we cannot expect that much from Nipon today. I will do anything in the world, cried Otto, eagerly. Send me anywhere. Do think of something that I can do. What must be done? Petter asked his mistress. There is quite enough to fear, Erica, without a word of Nipon pirates on the coast, and one farmhouse seen burning already. I will tell you what you must let me do, madame, said Erica. Indeed, you must not oppose me. My mind is quite set upon going for the boat immediately this very minute. That will give us time, it will give us safety for this night. Hund might bring 7 or 8 men upon us over the promontory. But if they find no boat, I think they can hardly work up the windings of the Fiord in their own vessel tonight, unless, indeed, she added with a sigh, they have a most favorable wind. All this is true enough, said her mistress, but how will you go? Will you swim? The raft, madame. And there is the old skiff on Thor Islet, said Otto. It is a rickety little thing, hardly big enough for 2, but it will carry down Erica and me if we go before the tide turns." "But how will you get to Thor Islet?" inquired Madame Erlingson. "I wish the scheme were not such a wild one." "A wild one must serve at such a time," Madame replied. "Erica Rolfe had lashed several logs before he went. I am sure we can get over to the islet. See, Madame, the Fiord is as smooth as a pond." "Let her go," said Petter, "she will never repent." "Then come back, I charge you, if you find the least danger," said her mistress. "No one is safer at the oar than you. But if there is a ripple in the water or a gust on the heights, or a cloud in the sky, come back. Such is my command, Erica." "Wife," said Petter, "give her your police, that will save her seeing the girls before she goes, and she shall have my cap, and then there is not an eye along that Fiord that can tell whether she is man or woman." Ulla lent her deerskin police willingly enough, but she entreated that Otto might be kept at home. She folded her arms about the boy with tears, but Petter decided the matter with the words, "Let him go, it is the least he can do to make up for last night. Equip Otto." Otto equipped willingly enough. In 2 minutes, he and his companion looked like 2 walking bundles of fur. Otto carried a frail basket containing rye-bread, salt fish, and a flask of corn brandy, for in Norway, no one goes on the shortest expedition without carrying provisions. "Surely it must be dusk by this time," said Petter. It was dusk, and this was well, as the pair could steal down to the shore without being perceived from the house. Madame Erlingson gave them her blessing, saying that if the enterprise saved them from nothing worse than Hun's company this night, it would be a great good. There could be no more comfort in having Hund for an inmate for some improper secret. He certainly had. Her hope was that, finding the boat gone, he would never show himself again. Erica now profited by her lover's industry. In the morning, he had so far advanced with the raft that though no one would have thought of taking it in its present state to the mouth of the Fiord for shipment, it would serve as a conveyance in still water for a short distance, safely enough. And still indeed the waters were, as Erica and Otto were busily and silently employed in tying moss round their oars to muffle their sound. The ripple of the tide upon the white sand could scarcely be heard, and it appeared to the eye as if the lingering remains of the daylight brooded on the Fiord, unwilling to depart. The stars had however been showing themselves for some time, and they might now be seen twinkling below almost as clearly and steadily as overhead. As Erica and Otto put their little raft off from the shore, and then waited with their oars suspended to observe whether the tide carried them towards the islet they must reach, it seemed as if some invisible hand was pushing them forth to shiver the bright pavement of constellations. As it lay, star after star was shivered, and its bright fragments danced in their wake, and those fragments reunited and became a star again, as the waters closed over the path of the raft and subsided into perfect stillness. The tide favored Erica's object. A few strokes of the oar brought the raft to the right point for landing on the islet. They stepped ashore and towed the raft along till they came to the skiff, and then they fastened the raft with the boathook, which had been fixed there for the skiff. This done, Otto ran to turn over the little boat and examine its condition, but he found he could not move it. It was frozen fast to the ground. It was scarcely possible to get a firm hold of it. It was so slippery with ice, and all pulling and pushing of the two together was in vain, though the boat was so light that either of them could have lifted and carried it in a time of thaw. This circumstance caused a great deal of delay, and what was worse, it obliged them to make some noise. They struck at the ice with sharp stones, but it was long before they could make any visible impression, and Erica proposed again and again that they should proceed on the raft. Otto was unwilling. The skiff would go so incomparably faster that it was worth spending some time upon it, and the fears he had had of its leaking were removed now that he found what a sheet of ice it was, covered with a sea, which would not melt to admit a drop of water while they were in it. So he knocked and knocked away, wishing that the echoes would be quiet for once, and then laughing as he imagined the ghost stories that would spring up all round the Fiord tomorrow from the noise he was then making. Erica worked hard too, and one advantage of their labor was that they were well warmed before they put off again. The boat's icy fastenings were all broken at last, and it was launched, but all was not yet ready. The skiff had lain in a direction east and west, and its north side had so much thicker a coating of ice than the other that its balance was destroyed. It hung so low on one side as to promise to upset with a touch. "We must clear off more of the ice," said Erica, "but how late it is growing." "No more knocking, I say," replied Otto. "There is a quieter way of trimming the boat." He fastened a few stones to the gunwale on the lighter side, and took in a few more for the purpose of shifting the weight if necessary while they were on their way. They did not leave quiet behind them. When they departed, they had roused the multitude of eider ducks and other seafowl which thronged the islet, and which now being roused began their night feeding, and flying though at an earlier hour than usual, when their discordant cries were left so far behind, as to be softened by distance the flapping of wings and swash of water, as the fowl plunged in, still made the air busy all around. The rowers were so occupied with the management of their dangerous craft that they had not spoken since they left the islet. The skiff would have been unmanageable by any maiden and boy in our country. But on the coast of Norway, it is as natural to persons of all ages and degrees to guide a boat as to walk swiftly, but cautiously they shot through the water. "Are you sure you know the cove?" asked Erica. "Quite sure. I wish I was as sure that Hund would not find it again before me pull away." "How much farther is it?" "Farther than I like to think of. I doubt your arm," holding out, "I wish Rolf was here." Erica did not wish the same thing. She thought that Rolf was on the whole safer waging war with bears than with pirates, especially if Hund was among them. She pulled her oar cheerfully, observing that there was no fatigue at present, and that when they were once afloat in the heavier boat, and had cleared the cove, there need be no hurry unless indeed they should see something of the pirate schooner on the way. And of this she had no expectation, as the booty that might be had where the fishery was beginning was worth more than anything that could be found higher up the fjords, to say nothing of the danger of running up into the country, so far as that getting away again depended upon one particular wind. Yet Erica looked behind her after every few strokes of her oar, and once when she saw something her start was felt like a start of the skiff itself. There was a fire glancing and gleaming, and quivering over the water some way down the fjord. "Some people night fishing," observed Otto. "What sport they will have! I wish I was with them. How fast we go! How you can row when you choose! I can see the man that is holding the torch. Cannot you see his black figure? And the spearman, see how he stands at the bow, going to cast his spear. I wish I was there." "We must get farther away into the shadow somewhere, or wait," observed Erica. "I had rather not wait. It is growing so late. We might creep along under that promontory in the shadow. If you would be quiet. I wonder whether you can be silent in the sight of night fishing." "To be sure," said Otto, disposed to be angry, and only kept from it by the thought of last night. He helped to bring the skiff into the shadow of the overhanging rocks, and only spoke once more to whisper that the fishing boat was drifting down with the tide, and that he thought their cove lay between them and the fishing party. It was so. As the skiff rounded the point of the promontory, Otto pointed out what appeared like a mere dark chasm in the high perpendicular wall of rock that bounded the waters. This chasm still looked so narrow on approaching it that Erica hesitated to push her skiff into it, till certain that there was no one there. Otto was so clear that she might safely do this, so noiseless was their rowing, and it was so plain that there was no footing on the rocks by which he might enter to explore that in a sort of desperation. And seeing nothing else to be done, Erica agreed. She wished it had been summer, when either of them might have learned what they wanted by swimming. This was now out of the question, and stealthily, therefore, she pulled her little craft into the deepest shadow and crept into the cove. At a little distance from the entrance, it widened, but it was a wonder to Erica that even Otto's eyes should have seen Hund moor his boat here from the other side of the fjord. Though the fjord was not more than a gunshot over in this part, Otto himself wondered, till he recalled how the sun was shining down into the chasm at the time. By starlight the outline of all that the cove contained might be seen, the outline of the boat among other things. There she lay, but there was something about her which was unpleasant enough. There were 3 men in her. What was to be done now? Here was the very worst danger that Erica had feared, worse than finding the boat gone, worse than meeting it in the wide fjord. What was to be done? There was nothing for it but to do nothing, to lie perfectly still in the shadow, ready, however, to push out on the first movement of the boat, to leave the cove, for though the canoe might remain unnoticed at present, it was impossible that anybody could pass out of the cove without seeing her. In such a case, there would be nothing for it but a race for which Erica and Otto held themselves prepared without any mutual explanation, for they dared not speak. The faintest whisper would have crept over the smooth water to the ears in the larger boat. One thing was certain, that something must happen presently. It is impossible for the hardiest men to sit inactive in a boat for any length of time, in a January night in Norway, in the calmest nights. The cold is only to be sustained by means of the glow from strong exercise. It was certain that these 3 men could not have been long in their places, and that they would not sit many moments more without some change in their arrangements. They did not seem to be talking, for Otto, who was the best listener in the world, could not discover that a sound issued from their boat. He fancied they were drowsy, and being aware what were the consequences of yielding to drowsiness in severe cold, the boy began to entertain high hopes of taking these 3 men prisoners. The whole country would ring with such a feat performed by Erica and himself. The men were too much awake to be made prisoners of at present. One was seen to drink from a flask, and the hoarse voice of another was heard grumbling as far as the listeners could make out at being kept waiting. The third then rose to look about him, and Erica trembled from head to foot. He only looked upon the land, however, declared he saw nothing of those he was expecting, and began to warm himself as he stood by, repeatedly clapping his arms across his breast. This was Hund. He could not have been known by his figure, for all persons look alike in wolfskin pelisses. But the voice and the action were his. Otto saw how Erica shuddered. He put his finger on his lips, but Erica needed no reminding of the necessity of quietness. The other 2 men then rose, and after a consultation, the words of which could not be heard, all stepped ashore one after another, and climbed a rocky pathway. Now, whispered Erica, now we can get. Not without the boat, said Otto. You would not leave them the boat? Not if, but they will be back in a moment. They are only gone to hasten their companions. I know it, said Otto, now 2 strokes forward. While she gave these 2 strokes which brought the skiff to the stern of the boat, Erica saw that Otto had taken out a knife which gleamed in the starlight. It was for cutting the thong by which the boat was fastened to a birch pole, the other end of which was hooked on shore. This was to save his going ashore to unhook the pole. It was well for him that boat chains were not in use owing to the scarcity of metal. In that region, the clink of a chain would certainly have been heard. Quickly and silently, he entered the boat and tied the skiff to its stern, and he and Erica took their places where the men had sat 1 minute before. They used their own muffled oars to turn the boat round, till Otto observed that the boat oars were muffled. 2 then voices were heard again. The men were returning strongly. Did the 2 companions draw their strokes, till a good breadth of water lay between them and the shore. And then, till they had again entered the deep shadow which shrouded the mouth of the cove, there they paused. In with you, some loud voice said, as man after man was seen in outline, coming down the pathway. In with you, we have lost time enough already. Where is she? I can't see the boat, answered the foremost man. You can't miss her, said one behind, unless the brandy has got into your eyes. So I should have said, but I do miss her. Otto shook with stifled laughter as he partly saw and partly overheard the perplexity of these men. At last one gave a deep groan, and another declared that the spirits of the Fiord were against them, and there was no doubt that their boat was now lying 20 fathoms deep at the bottom of the creek, drawn down by the strong hand of an angry water sprite. Otto squeezed Erica's little hand. As he heard this, if it had been light enough, he would have seen that even she was smiling. One of the men mourned their having no other boat, so that they must give up their plan. Another said that if they had a dozen boats, he would not set foot in one after what had happened. He should go straight back the way he came to their own vessel. Another said he would not go till he had looked abroad over the Fiord for some chance of seeing the boat. This he persisted in, though told by the rest that it was absurd to suppose that the boat had loosed itself and gone out into the Fiord. In the course of the 2 minutes that they had been absent, he showed the fragment of the cut thong in proof of the boat not having loosed itself, and set off for a point on the heights, which, he said, overlooked the Fiord. 1 or 2 went with him, the rest returning up the narrow pathway at some speed, such speed that Erica thought they were afraid of the hindmost being caught by the same enemy that had taken their boat. Otto observed this too, and he quickened their pace by setting up very loud the mournful cry with which he was accustomed to call out to the plovers on the mountainside on sporting days. No sound can be more melancholy, and now as it rang from the rocks, it was so unsuitable to the place, and so terrible to the already frightened men, that they ran on as fast as the slipperiness of the rocks would allow, till they were all out of sight over the ridge. Now for it, before the other 2 come out above us, there, said Otto, and in another minute they were again in the Fiord, keeping as much in the shadow as they could, however, till they must strike over to the islet. Thank God that we came, exclaimed Erica. We shall never forget what we owe you, Otto. You shall see by the care we take of your grandfather, and Allah, that we do not forget what you have done this night, if Nipon will only forgive for the sake of this. We were just in the nick of time, observed Otto. It was better than if we had been earlier. I do not know, said Erica. Here are their brandy bottles, and many things besides. I had rather not have had to bring these away. But if we had been earlier, they would not have had their fright. That is the best part of it, depend upon it. some that have not said their prayers for long will say them tonight. That will be good, but I do not like carrying home these things that are not ours. If they are seen at Erlingson's, they may bring the pirates down upon us. I would leave them on the islet, but that the skiff has to be left there too, and that would explain our trick. Erica would not consent to throw the property overboard. This would be robbing those who had not actually injured her, whatever their intentions might have been. She thought that if the goods were left upon some barren, uninhabited part of the shore, the pirates would probably be the first to find them, and that if not, the rumor of such an extraordinary fact spread by the simple country people would be sure to reach them. So Otto carried on shore at the first stretch of white beach. They came to the brandy flasks, the bearskins, the tobacco pouch, the muskets and powder horns, and the tinderbox. He scattered these about just above high-water mark, laughing to think how report would tell of the sprite's care in placing all these articles out of reach of injury from the water. Otto did not want for light. While doing this, when he returned, he found Erica gazing up over the towering precipices at the northern lights, which had now unfurled their broad yellow blaze. She was glad that they had not appeared sooner to spoil the adventure of the night, but she was thankful to have the way home thus illumined. Now that the business was done, she answered with so much alacrity to Otto's question whether she was not very weary, that he ventured to say two things which had before been upon his tongue, without his having the courage to utter them. "You will not be so afraid of Nipon any more," observed he, glancing at her face, of which he could see every feature by the quivering light. "You see how well everything has turned out." "Oh, hush, it is too soon yet to speak, so it is never right to speak, so pray do not speak any more, Otto." "Well, not about that, but what was it exactly that you thought Hund would do with this boat? And those people, did you think," he continued, after a short pause, "that they would come up to Erlingson's to rob the place?" "Not for the object of robbing the place, because there is very little that is worth their taking, far less than at the fishing grounds, not. But they might have robbed us, if they took a fancy to anything we have. No, I thought, and I still think, that they would have carried off Rolf, led on by Hund." "Oh ho, carried off Rolf, so here is the secret of your wonderful courage, tonight, you who durst not look round at your own shadow last night. This is the secret of your not being tired, you, who are out of breath with rowing a mile sometimes." "That is in summer," pleaded Erica. "However, you have my secret, as you say, a thing which is no secret at home. We all think that Hund bears such a grudge against Rolf for having got the houseman's place. And for nothing else. That," continued Erica, "he would be glad to get rid of Rolf and be a houseman, and get betrothed instead of him. Well, Hund is balked for this time. Rolf must look to himself after today." Erica sighed deeply. She did not believe that Rolf would attend to his own safety, and the future looked very dark, all shrouded by her fears. By the time the skiff was deposited where it had been found, both the rowers were so weary that they gave up the idea of taking the raft in tow. As for full security, they ought to do. They doubted whether they could get home if they had more weight to draw than their own boat. It was well that they left this encumbrance behind, for there was quite peril, and difficulty enough without it, and Erica's strength and spirits failed the more the farther the enemy was left behind. A breath of wind seemed to bring a sudden darkening of the friendly lights, which had blazed up higher and brighter from their first appearance, till now both rowers looked down the Fiord, and uttered an exclamation at the same moment. "See the fog!" cried Otto, putting fresh strength into his oar. "Oh, Nipon," mournfully exclaimed Erica, "here it is, Otto, the west wind." "The west wind is in winter the great foe of the fishermen of the fjords. It brings in the fog from the sea, and the fogs of the Arctic Circle are no trifling enemy. If Nipon really had the charge of the winds, he could not more emphatically show his displeasure towards any unhappy boatman than by overtaking him with the west wind and fog." "The wind must have just changed," said Otto, pulling exhausting strokes, as the fog marched towards them over the water like a solid and immeasurably lofty wall. "The wind must have gone right round in a minute." "To be sure, since you said what you did of Nipon," replied Erica bitterly. Otto made no answer, but he did what he could. Erica had to tell him not to wear himself out too quickly, as there was no saying now how long they should be on the water. How long they had been on the water, how far they had deviated from their right course, they could not at all tell, when at last, more by accident than skill, they touched the shore near home, and heard friendly voices, and saw the light of torches through the thick air. The fog had wrapped them round, so that they could not even see the water or each other. They had rowed mechanically, sometimes touching the rock, sometimes grazing upon the sand, but never knowing where they were till the ringing of a bell, which they recognized as the farm bell, roused hope in their hearts and strengthened them to throw off the fatal drowsiness caused by cold and fatigue. They made towards the bell, and then heard Petter's shouts, and next saw the dull light of 2 torches, which looked as if they could not burn in the fog. The old man lent a strong hand to pull up the boat upon the beach, and to lift out the benumbed rowers, and they were presently revived by having their limbs chafed, and by a strong dose of the universal medicine corn brandy and camphor which, in Norway neither man, nor woman young nor old sick, nor well thinks of refusing upon occasion. When Erica was in bed warm beneath an eiderdown, coverlet her mistress bent over her, and whispered, "You saw and heard Hund himself." "Hund himself, madame. What shall we do, if he comes back before my husband is home from the bear hunt? If he comes, it will be in fear and penitence, thinking that all the powers are against him. But oh, madame, let him never know how it really was. Leave that to me, and go to sleep now, Erica. You ought to rest well, for there is no saying what you and Otto have saved us, for I could not have asked such a service my husband, and I must see how we can reward it." And her kind and grateful mistress kissed Erica's cheek, though Erica tried to explain that she was thinking most of someone else when she undertook this expedition. Great was Stiorna's consternation at Hund's non-appearance the next day. Seeing us, she did with her own eyes that the boat was safe in its proper place. She saw that no one wished him back. He was rarely spoken of, and then it was with dislike or fear. And when she wept over the idea of his being drowned or carried off by hostile spirits, the only comfort offered her was that she need not fear his being dead, or that he could not come back if he chose. She was indeed obliged to suppose at last that it was his choice to keep away, for amidst the flying rumors that amused the inhabitants of the district, for the rest of the winter rumors of the movements of the pirate vessel, and of the pranks of the spirits of the region, there were some such clear notices of the appearance of Hund. So many eyes had seen him in one place or another, by land and water, by day and night, that Stiorna could not doubt of his being alive and free to come home or stay away as he pleased. She could not conceal from herself that he had probably joined the pirates. Erlingson and Rolf came home sooner than might reasonably have been expected, and well laden with bear's flesh. The whole family of bears had been found and shot. He sometimes hammered at his skiff. Erlingson kept a keen and constant lookout upon the Fiord. His wife's account of the adventures of the day of his absence made him anxious, and he never went a mile out of sight of home. So vivid in his imagination was the vision of his house burning, and his family at the mercy of pirates. So came on and passed away the spring of this year at Erlingson's farm. It soon passed for spring in Nordland. Lasts only a month. About the bridges, which span the falls, where little groups of the peasants gathered, mending such as had burst with the floods, or strengthening such as did not seem secure enough for the passage of the herds to the mountain. During the one busy month of spring, a slight shade of sadness was thrown over the household. Within, by the decline of old Ulla, it was hardly sadness. It was little more than gravity, for Ulla herself was glad to go. Petter knew that he should soon follow, and everyone else was reconciled to one who had suffered so long going to her rest. One day Rolf led Erica to the grave, when they knew that no one was there. Now he said, "You know what she who lies there would like us to be settling. She herself said her burial day would soon be over, and then would come our wedding day." "When everything is ready," replied Erica, "we will fix, but not now. There is much to be done. There are many uncertainties." "What uncertainties?" "It is often an uncertainty to me, Erica, after all that has happened, whether you mean to marry me at all. There are so many doubts, and so many considerations, and so many fears." Erica quietly observed that they had enemies, un deadly enemy, not very far off if nothing were to be said of any but human foes. Rolf declared that he had rather have Hund for a declared enemy than for a companion. Erica understood this very well, but she could not forget that Hund wanted to be houseman in Rolf's stead, and that he desired to prevent their marriage. "That is the very reason," said Rolf, "why we should marry as soon as we can. Why not fix the day, and engage the pastor while he is here?" "Because it would hurt Petter's feelings. There will be no difficulty in sending for the pastor when everything is ready. But now, Rolf, that all may go well, do promise not to run into needless danger." "According to you," said Rolf, smiling, "one can never get out of danger. Where is the use of taking care, if all the powers of earth and air are against us?" "I am not speaking of Knipen, no, not because I do not think of it. I am speaking of Hund. Do promise me not to go more than 4 miles down the Fiord After that there is a long stretch of precipices, without a single dwelling. There is not a boat that could put off, there is not an eye or an ear that could bear witness what had become of you if you and Hund should meet there. I will promise you not to go farther down, while alone than Vogel Islet, unless it is quite certain that Hund and the pirates are far enough off in another direction. I partly think as you do, and as Erlingson does, that they meant to come for me the night you carried off their boat. So I will be on the watch, and go no farther than where they cannot hurt me. Then why say Vogel Islet? It is out of all reasonable distance. Not to those who know the Fiord as I do. I have my reasons, Erica, for fixing that distance, and no other, and that far I intend to go, whether my friends think me able to take care of myself or not. At least, pleaded Erica, let me go with you. Not for the world, my love, and Erica saw by his look of horror at the idea of her going that he felt anything but secure from the pirates. He took her hand, and kissed it again and again, as he said that there was plenty for that little hand to do at home, instead of pulling the oar in the hot sun. I shall think of you all while I am fishing, he went on. I shall fancy you making ready for the cedar too. How happy we shall be, Erica, when we once get to the cedar. Erica sighed and pressed her lover's hand as he held hers. Who was ever happier than Rolf when abroad in his skiff, on one of the most glorious days of the year? He found his angling tolerably successful near home, but the farther he went the more the herrings abounded, and he therefore dropped down the fjord with the tide, fishing as he receded, till all home objects had disappeared. When he came to the narrow part of the fjord near the creek which had been the scene of Erica's exploit, Rolf laid aside his rod, with the bright hook that herrings so much admire, to guide his canoe through the currents caused by the approach of the rocks and contraction of the passage. And he then wished he had brought Erica with him. So lovely was the scene. Here and there a clump of dark pines overhung some busy cataract which itself overshadowed, sent forth its little clouds of spray dancing and glittering in the sunlight. A pair of fishing eagles were perched on a high ledge of rock, screaming to the echoes. On went Rolf beyond the bounds of prudence, as many have done before him. He soon found himself in a still and somewhat dreary region, where there was no motion but of the seabirds and of the air, which appeared to quiver before the eye from the evaporation caused by the heat of the sun. Leisurely and softly did Rolf cast his net, and then steadily did he draw it in so rich in fish that, when they lay in the bottom of the boat, they at once sank it deeper in the water, and checked its speed by their weight. Rolf then rested a while. There lay Vogel Islet looming in the heated atmosphere. He was roused at length by a shout, and looked towards the point from which it came. And there, in a little harbor of the fjord, a recess which now actually lay behind him, between him and home lay a vessel, and that vessel he knew by a second glance was the pirate schooner. Of the schooner itself he had no fear, for there was so little wind that it could not have come out in time to annoy him. But there was the schooner's boat with 5 men in it for rowing, and 1 steering gallery in full pursuit of him. He knew, by the general air and native dress of the man at the helm, that it was Hund, and he fancied he heard Hund's malicious voice in the shout, which came rushing over the water from their boat to his. How fast they seemed to be coming, how the spray from their oars glittered in the sun, and how their wake lengthened with every stroke. No spectator from the shore, if there had been any, could have doubted that the boat was in pursuit of the skiff, and would snap it up presently. Rolf saw that he had 5 determined foes gaining upon him every instant, and yet he was not alarmed. He had had his reasons for thinking himself safe near Vogel Islet, and calculating for a moment the time of the tide, he was quite at his ease. As he took his oars he smiled at the hot haste of his pursuers, and at the thought of the amazement they would feel when he slipped through their fingers, and then he began to row. Rolf did not overheat himself with too much exertion. He permitted his foes to gain a little upon him. When very near the islet, however, he became more active, and his skiff disappeared behind its southern point. While the enemy's boat was still 2 furlongs off, the steersman looked for the reappearance of the canoe beyond the islet. But he looked in vain, he thought, and his companions agreed with him that it was foolish of Rolf to land upon the islet, where they could lay hands on him in a moment. But they could only suppose he had done this, and prepared to do the same. They rowed quite round the islet, but to their amazement they could not only perceive no place to land at, but there was no trace of the canoe. It seemed to them as if those calm and clear waters had swallowed up the skiff and Rolf in a few minutes. After they had lost sight of him, Hund thought the case was accounted for when he recalled Nippon's displeasure. The rowers wondered, questioned, uttered shouts, spoke all together, and then looked at Hund in silence, struck by his countenance, and finished by rowing 2 or 3 times round the islet slowly, and looking up its bare rocky sides, which rose like walls from the water, but nothing could they see or hear when tired of their fruitless search. They returned to the schooner ready to report to the master that the Fiord was enchanted. Meantime Rolf had heard every splash of their oars, and every tone of their voices as they rowed round his place of refuge. He was not on the islet, but in it this was such an island as Swain the seeking of former days took refuge in, and Rolf was only following his example long before he had discovered a curious cleft in the rock, very narrow and all but invisible at high water, even if a bush of dwarf ash and birch had not hung down over it. At high water nothing larger than a bird could go in and out beneath the low arch. But there was a cavern within whose sandy floor sloped up to some distance above high-water mark. In this cavern was Rolf. He had thrust his little skiff between the walls of rock, crushing in its sides as he did so. The bushes drooped behind him, hanging naturally over the entrance. As before, Rolf pulled up his broken vessel upon the little sandy beach within the cave, saved a pile of his fish, and returned a good many to the water, and then sat down upon the seaweeds to listen. There was no light but a little which found its way through the bushy screen and up from the green water, and the soundside tones of the pirates' voices, and the splash of the waters against the rocky walls of his singular prison came, deadened and changed to his ear. Yet he heard enough to be aware how long his enemies remained, and when they were really gone. It was a prison indeed, as Rolf reflected when he looked upon his broken skiff. He could not imagine how he was to get away, for his friends would certainly never think of coming to look for him here. But he put off the consideration of this point for the present, and turned away from the image of Erica's distress. When he should fail to return, he amused himself now with imagining Hun's disappointment, and the reports which would arise from it, and he found this so very entertaining that he laughed aloud. And then the echo of his laughter sounded so very merry that it set him laughing again. This, in its turn, seemed to rouse the eiderducks that thronged the island, and their clatter and commotion was so great overhead that any spectator might have been excused for believing that Vogel Islet was indeed bewitched. Rolf turned his boat about and shook his head over every bruise, hole, or crack that he found, till he finished with a nod of decision that nothing could be done with it. He was a good swimmer, but the nearest point of the shore was so far off that it would be all he could do to reach it when the waters were in their most favorable state. At present, they were so chilled with the melted snows that were pouring down from every steep along the Fiord, that he doubted the safety of attempting to swim at all. What chance of release had he then? If he could by any means climb upon the rocks, in whose recesses he was now hidden, he might possibly fall in with some fishing boat, which would fetch him off. But besides that the pirates were more likely to see him than anybody else, he believed there was no way by which he could climb upon the islet. It had always been considered the exclusive property of the aquatic birds with which it swarmed, because its sides rose so abruptly from the water, so like the smooth stone walls of a lofty building, that there was no hold for foot or hand, and the summit seemed unattainable by anything that had not wings. Rolf remembered, however, having heard Petter say that, when he was young, there might be seen hanging down one part of the precipice the remains of a birchen ladder, which must have been made and placed there by human hands. Rolf determined that he would try the point. He would wait till the tide was flowing in, as the waters from the open sea were somewhat less chilled than when returning from the head of the Fiord, would take the waters at their warmest, and try again to make a footing upon the islet. His cave was really a very pretty place. The golden light, which blesses the high and low places of the earth, did not disdain to cheer and adorn even this humble chamber, which the waters had patiently scooped out of the hard rock. As the sun drew to its setting near the middle of the Nordland summer night, it leveled its golden rays through the cleft, and made the place far more brilliant than at noon. The beach suddenly appeared of a more dazzling white, and the waters of a deeper green, while by their motion they cast quivering circles of reflected light upon the roof, which had before been invisible. Rolf had supposed from the pleasant freshness of the air that the cave was lofty, and he now saw that the roof did indeed spring up to a vast height. He saw also that there was a great deal of driftwood accumulated, and some of it thrown into such distant corners as to prove that the waves could dash up to a much higher waterline in stormy weather than he had supposed. No matter, he hoped to be gone before there were any more storms. Tired and sleepy, as he was so near midnight, he made an exertion, while there was plenty of light, to clear away the seaweeds from a space on the sand, where he must tomorrow make his fire and broil his fish. The smell of the smallest quantity of burnt weed would be intolerable in so confined a place, so he cleared away every sprout of it, and laid some of the driftwood on a spot above high-water mark, picking out the driest pieces of firewood he could find for kindling a flame. When this was done, he made haste to heap up a bed of fine dry sand in a corner, and here he lay down as the twilight darkened for this one night. He could rest without any very painful thoughts of poor Erica, for she was prepared for his remaining out till the middle of the next day at least. When he awoke in the morning, the scene was marvelously changed. His cave was so dim that he could scarcely distinguish its white floor from its rocky sides. The water was low, and the cleft therefore enlarged, so that he saw at once that now was the time for making his Fiord, when there was the freest access for the air. Yet he could not help pausing to admire what he saw. He could see now a long strip of the Fiord perspective of waters and of shores ending in a lofty peak, still capped with snow and glittering in the sunlight. He began to sing while rubbing together with all his might the dry sticks of fir with which his fire was to be kindled. First they smoked, and then by a skillful breath of air they blazed, and set fire to the heap. And by the time the herrings were ready for broiling, the cave was so filled with smoke that Rolf's singing was turned to coughing. Some of the smoke hung in soot on the roof and walls of the cave, curling up so well at first that Rolf almost thought there must be some opening in the lofty roof, which served as a chimney, but there was not, and some of the smoke came down again, issuing at last from the mouth of the cave. Rolf observed this, and seeing the danger of his place of retreat being thus discovered, he made haste to finish his cookery, resolving that if he had to remain here for any length of time, he would always make his fire in the night. He presently threw water over his burning brands, and hoped that nothing had been seen of the process of preparing his breakfast. The smoke had been seen, however, and by several people, but in such a way as to lead to no discovery of the cave from the schooner. Hund kept his eyes fixed on the islet at every moment. He had to spare either he was the murderer of his fellows, or the islet was bewitched, and if Rolf was under the protection and favor of the powers of the region, Hund was out of favor and might expect bad consequences. Whichever might be the case, Hund was very uneasy, and he could think of nothing but the islet and look no other way. His companions had at first joked him about his luck in getting rid of his enemies, but being themselves superstitious, they caught the infection of his gravity, and watched the spot almost as carefully as he. As their vessel lay higher up in the Fiord than the islet, they were on the opposite side from the crevice, and could not see from whence the smoke issued, but they saw it in the form of a light cloud hanging over the place. Hund's eyes were fixed upon it, when one of his comrades touched him on the shoulder. Hund started. "You see there," said the man, pointing. "To be sure I do. What else was I looking at?" "Well, what is it?" inquired the man. "Has your friend got a visitor come a great way this morning? They say the mountain sprite travels in mist. If so, it is now going. See there. It sails off, melts away. It is as like common smoke as anything that ever I saw. What say you to taking the boat, and trying again, whether there is no place where your friend might not land, and be now making a fire among the birds' nests?" "Nonsense," cried Hund. "What became of the skiff then?" "True," said the man, and shaking his head, he passed on and spoke to the master. In his own secret mind, the master of the schooner did not quite like his present situation. After hearing the words dropped by his crew, he did not relish being stationed between the bewitched islet and the head of the Fiord, where all the residents were of course enemies. As there was now a light wind enough to take his vessel down, he gave orders accordingly. Slowly and at some distance, the schooner passed the islet, and all on board crowded together to see what they could see. None saw anything remarkable, but all heard something. There was a faint muffled sound of noxblows, such as were never heard in a mere haunt of seabirds. It was evident that the birds were disturbed by it. They rose and fell, made short flights, and came back again, fluttered and sometimes screamed. But if they were quiet for a minute, the knock-knock was heard again with great regularity, and every knock went to Hund's heart. The fact was that after breakfast Rolf soon became tired of having nothing to do. The water was so very cold that he deferred till noon the attempt to swim round the islet. He thought he had better try to mend his little craft than do nothing. After collecting from the wood in the cave all the nails that happened to be sticking in it, and all the pieces that were sound enough to patch a boat with, he made a stone serve him for a hammer, straightened his nails upon another stone, and tried to fasten on a piece of wood over a hole. It was discouraging work enough, but it helped to pass the hours till the restless waters reached their highest mark in the cave, when he knew that it was noon and time for his little expedition. It was too cold by far for safe swimming. All the snows of Sulitlama could hardly have made the waters more chilly to the swimmer than they felt at the first plunge. But Rolf would not retreat. For this reason he thought of the sunshine outside, and of the free open view he should enjoy. Dived beneath the almost closed entrance, and came up on the other side. The first thing he saw was the schooner now lying below his island, and the next thing was a small boat between him and it, evidently making towards him. When convinced that Hund was one of the 3 men in it, he saw that he must go back or make haste to finish his expedition. He made haste, swam round so close as to touch the warm rock in many places, and could not discover any more than before any trace of a footing by which a man might climb to the summit. There was a crevice or two, however, from which vegetation hung still left unsearched. He could not search them now, for he must make haste home. The boat was indeed so near. When he had reached the point he set out from, that he used every effort to conceal himself, and it seemed that he could only have escaped by the eyes of his enemies being fixed on the summit of the rock. When once more in the cave, he rather enjoyed hearing them come nearer, and nearer, so that the bushes which hung down between him and them shook with the wind of their oars, and dipped into the waves. He laughed silently when he heard one of them swear that he would not leave the spot till he had seen something, upon which another rebuked his presumption. Presently a voice which he knew to be Hund's called upon his name, at first gently, and then more and more loudly, as if taking courage at not being answered. "I will wait till he rounds the point," thought Rolf, "and then give him such an answer as may send a guilty man away quicker than he came." He waited till they were on the opposite side, so that his voice might appear to come from the summit of the islet, and then began with the melancholy sound used to lure the plover on the moors. The men in the boat instantly observed that this was the same sound used when Erlingson's boat was spirited away from them. It was rather singular that Rolf and Otto should have used the same sound, but they probably chose it as the most mournful they knew. Rolf moaned louder and louder, till the sound resembled the bellowing of a tormented spirit enclosed in the rock, and the consequence was, as he had said, that his enemies retreated faster than they came. For the next few days, Rolf kept a close watch upon the proceedings of the pirates, and saw enough of their thievery to be able to lay information against them, if ever he should again make his way to a town or village, and see the face of a magistrate. The worst of it was that the season for boating was nearly at an end. The inhabitants were day by day driving their cattle up the mountains there to remain for the summer, and the heads of families remained in the farmhouses almost alone, and little likely to put out so far into the Fiord as to pass near him to drive off thoughts of his poor distressed Erica. He sometimes hammered a little at his skiff, but it was too plain that no botching that he could perform in the cave would render the broken craft safe to float in. One sunny day, when the tide was flowing in warmer than usual, Rolf amused himself with more evolutions in bathing than he had hitherto indulged in. He forgot his troubles and his foes in diving, floating, and swimming. As he dashed round a point of a rock, he saw something, and was certain he was seen. Hund appeared at least as much bewitched as the islet itself, for he could not keep away from it. He seemed irresistibly drawn to the scene of his guilt and terror. Here he was now with one other man in the schooner's smallest boat. Rolf had to determine in an instant what to do, for they were within 100 yards, and Hund's starting eyes showed that he saw what he took for the ghost of his fellow-servant. Rolf raised himself as high as he could out of the water, throwing his arms up above his head, fixed his eyes on Hund, uttered a shrill cry, and dived, hoping to rise to the surface at some point out of sight. Hund looked no more. After one shriek of terror and remorse had burst from his white lips, he sank his head upon his knee, and let his comrade take all the trouble of rowing home again. This vision decided Hund's proceedings. Half crazed with remorse, he left the pirates that night. After long consideration where to go, he decided upon returning to Erlingson's. He did not know to what extent they suspected him. He was pretty sure that they held no proofs against him. He felt irresistibly drawn towards poor Erica now that no rival was there. And if mixed with all these considerations, there were some thoughts of the situation of housemen being vacant and needing much to be filled up, it is no wonder that such a mingling of motives took place in a mind so selfish as Hund's. Hund performed his journey by night. He did not for a moment think of going by the Fiord laboriously and diligently. Therefore he overcame the difficulties of the path, crossing ravines, wading through swamps, scaling rocks, leaping across watercourses, and only now and then throwing himself down on some tempting slope of grass to wipe his brows, and to moisten his parched throat with the wild strawberries, which were fast ripening in the sheltered nooks of the hills. It was now so near midsummer, and the nights were so fast melting into the days that Hund could at the latest scarcely see a star, though there was not a fleece of cloud in the whole circle of the heavens, while yet the sun was sparkling on the Fiord, and glittering on every farmhouse window that fronted the west all around, was as still as if the deepest darkness had settled down. Hund knew, as he passed one dwelling after another, knew, as well as if he had looked in at the windows, that the inhabitants were all asleep, even with the sunshine lying across their very faces. Every few minutes, he observed how his shadow lengthened, and he longed for the brief twilight, which would now soon be coming on. There were a few extremely faint stars, very few, for only the brightest could now show themselves in the sky, where daylight lingered, so as never quite to depart. A pale green hue remained where the sun had disappeared, and a deep red glow was even now beginning to kindle where he was soon to rise. But man must have rest be the sun high, or sunk beneath the horizon, so that Hund saw no face, and heard no human voice before he found himself standing at the top of the steep rocky pathway, which led down to Erlingson's abode. He found everything in a different state from that in which he had left the place. The stable doors stood wide, and there was no trace of milk pills. The hurdles of the fold were piled upon one another. In a corner of the yard, it was plain that herd, flock, and dairywomen were gone to the mountain, and though Hund dreaded meeting Erica, it struck upon his heart to think that she was not here. He felt now how much it was for her sake that he had come back. His eye fell upon the boat, which lay gently rocking with the receding tide in its tiny cove, and he resolved to lie down in it and rest, while considering what to do next. He went down, stepping gently over the pebbles of the beach, lest his tread should reach and waken any ear through the open windows. Lay down at the bottom of the boat, and fell asleep. Otto was the first to come forth to water the one horse that remained at the farm, and to give a turn and a shake to the 2 or 3 little cocks of hay, which had been mown behind the house. His quick eye noted the deep marks of a man's feet in the sand, and pebbles below high-water mark, proving that someone had been on the premises during the night. He followed these marks to the boat, where he was amazed to find the enemy, as he called Hund, fast asleep. Otto was in a great hurry to tell his grandfather Erlingson being on the mountain, but he thought it only proper caution to secure his prize from escaping in his absence. He summoned his companion, the dog which had warned him of many dangers abroad, and helped him faithfully with his work at home, and nothing could be clearer to Scoro than that he was to crouch on the thwarts of the boat with his nose close to Hund's face, and not to let Hund stir till Odd came back. Then Otto ran and wakened his grandfather, who made all haste to rise and dress. Erica now lived in Petter's house. Hearing Otto's story, she rushed out, and her voice was soon heard in passionate entreaty above the bark of the dog, which was trying to prevent the prisoner from rising. "Only tell me," Erica was heard to say, "only tell me where and how he died. I know he is dead. I knew he would die from that terrible night when we were betrothed. Tell me who did it, for I am sure you know. Was it Nipon? Oh, Hund, speak, say only where his body is, and I will try never to speak to you again, ever to no other than the mountain demon." Hund looked miserable. He moved his lips, but no sound was heard mingling with Erica's rapid speech. Madame Erlingson, who with Orga had by this time reached the spot, laid her hand on Erica's arm to beg for a moment's silence, made Otto call his dog out of the boat, and then spoke in a severe tone to Hund. "Why do you shake your head, Hund, and speak no word? Say what you know for the sake of those whom we grievously suspect you have deeply injured. Say what you know, Hund." "What I say is that I do not know," replied Hund in a hoarse and agitated voice. "I only know that we live in an enchanted place here by this Fiord, and that the spirits try to make us answer for their doings. The very first night, after I went forth, this very boat was spirited away from me, so that I could not come home. Nipon had a spite against me there too. Make you all suspect me. I declare to you that the boat was gone in a twinkling by magic, and I heard the cry of the spirit that took it." "What was the cry like?" asked Otto gravely. "Where were you that you were not spirited away with the boat?" asked his mistress. "I was tumbled out upon the shore. I don't know how," declared Hund. "Found myself sprawling on a rock, while the creature's cries brought my heart into my mouth as I lay." "Alone? Were you alone?" asked his mistress. "I had landed the pastor some hours before Madame, and I took nobody else with me, as Stiorna can tell, for she saw me go." "Stiorna is at the mountain," observed Madame coolly. "But Hund," said Otto, "how did Nipon take hold of you when it laid you sprawling on the rock, neck and heels, or did it bid you go and hearken whether the pirates were coming and whip away the boat before you came back? Are you quite sure that you sprawled on the rock at all before you ran away from the horrible cry? You speak of our rocks are very slippery when Nipon is at one's heels." Hund stared at Otto, and his voice was yet hoarser, when he said that he had long thought that boy was a favorite with Nipon, and he was sure of it now. Erica had thrown herself down on the sand, hiding her face on her hands on the edge of the boat, as if in despair of her misery being attended to her questions. Answered old Petter stood beside her stroking her hair tenderly, and he now spoke the things she could not. Attend to me, Hund, said Petter in the grave quiet tone, which everyone regarded. Hear my words. And for your own sake answer them. We suspect you of being in communication with the pirates yonder. We suspect that you went to meet them. When you refused to go hunting the bears, we know that you have long felt ill will towards Rolf, envy of him, jealousy of him. And here Erica looked up pale as ashes, and said, do not question him further, there is no truth in his answers, he spoke falsehood even now. Petter knew how Hund shrank under this, and thought the present the moment to get truth out of him, if he ever could speak it. He therefore went on to say, we suspect you of having done something to keep your rival out of the way, in order that you might obtain the house and situation and, perhaps, something else that you wish. Have you killed him? Asked Erica, abruptly looking full in his face. No, returned Hund firmly from his manner, everybody believed this much. Do you know that anybody else has killed him? No. Do you know whether he is alive or dead? To this Hund could, in the confusion of his ideas about Rolf's fate and condition, fairly say no, as also to the question, do you know where he is? Then they all cried out. Tell us what you do know about him. Aye, there you come, said Hund, resuming some courage, and putting on the appearance of more than he had. You load me with foul accusations, and when you find yourselves all in the wrong, you alter your tone, and put yourselves under obligation to me. For what I will tell, I will treat you better than you treat me, and I will tell you plainly why I repent of my feelings towards my fellow-servant, now that evil has befallen him. What, oh what, cried Erica. He was seen fishing on the Fiord, in that poor little worn-out skiff. I myself saw him, and when I looked next for the skiff it was gone. And where were you? Never mind where I was about my own business, and I tell you I no more laid a finger on him than any one of you. Where was it? Close by Vogel Islet. Erica started, and in one moment's flush of hope, told that Rolf had said he should be safe at any time near Vogel Islet. Hund caught at her words so eagerly as to make a favorable impression on all who saw what was indeed the truth, that he would have been glad to know that Rolf was alive. I believe some of the things you have told. I believe that you did not lay hands on Rolf. Bless you for that, interrupted Hund, almost forgetting how far he really was guilty. Tell me then, proceeded Erica, how you believe he really perished. I believe, whispered Hund, that the strong hand pulled him down to the bottom. I knew it, said Erica, turning away. Erica, on word, exclaimed Hund, I must stay here. I am very miserable, and I must stay here and work till I get some comfort. But you must tell me how you think of me. You must say that you do not hate me. I do hate you, said Erica, with disgust, as her suspicions of his wanting to fill Rolf's place were renewed. I mistrust you, Hund, more deeply than I can tell. Will no penitence change your feelings, Erica? I tell you I am as miserable as you. That is false, like everything else that you say, cried Erica. I wish you would go and seek Rolf under the waters. Hund shuddered at the thought as it recalled what he had seen and heard at the islet. Erica saw this and sternly repeated, go and bring back Rolf from the deeps, and then I will cease to hate you. As Erica slowly returned into Petter's house, Otto ran past, and was there before her. He closed the door when she had entered, put his hand within hers, and said, did Rolf really tell you that he should be safe anywhere near Vogel Islet? Yes, sighed Erica, safe from the pirates. That was his answer, when I begged him not to go so far down the Fiord. But Rolf always had an answer when one asked him not to go into danger. Erica, you went one trip with me, and I know you are brave. Will you go another? Will you go to the islet and see what Rolf could have meant about being safe there? Erica brightened for a moment, and perhaps would have agreed to go, but Petter came in, and Petter said he knew the islet well, and that it was universally considered that it was now inaccessible to human foot, and that was the reason why the fowl flourished there, as they did in no other place. Erica must not be permitted to go so far down among the haunts of the pirates. Instead of this, her mistress had just decided that, as there were no present means of getting rid of Hund, and as Erica could not be expected to remain just now in his presence, she should set off immediately for the mountain and request Erlingson to come home. Under Petter's urgency, she made up her bundle of clothes, took in her hand her lure 3, with which to call home the cattle in the evenings, bade her mistress farewell privately, and stole away without Hun's knowledge. Wandering with unwilling steps farther and farther from the spot where she had last seen, Rolf Erica dashed the tears from her eyes, and looked behind her at the entrance of a ravine, which would hide from her the Fiord, and the dwelling she had left Thor Islet lay like a fragment of the leafy forest cast into the blue waters, but Vogel Islet could not be seen. It was not too far down to be seen from an elevation like this, but it was hidden behind the promontories by which the Fiord was contracted. She looked behind her no more, but made her way rapidly through the ravine the more rapidly, because she had seen a man ascending by the same path at no great distance, and she had little inclination to be joined by a party of wandering Laplanders, still less by any neighbor from the Fiord who might think civility required that he should escort her to the cedar. This wayfarer was walking at a pace so much faster than hers that he would soon pass, and she would hide among the rocks beside the tarn at the head of the ravine, till he had gone by. Through the rich pasture Erica waited, till she reached the tarn which fed the stream that gamboled down the ravine. The death-cold unfathomed waters lay calm, and still under the shelter of the rocks, which nearly surrounded them. In the shadow of one of these rocks Erica sank down into the long grass. Here she would remain long enough to let the other wayfarer have a good start up the mountain, and by that time she should be cool and tranquilized. She hid her face in the fragrant grass, and did not look up again, till the grief of her soul was stilled. Then her eye and her heart were open to the beauty of the place which she had made her temple of worship, and she gazed around, till she saw something that surprised her. The traveler who she had hoped was now some way up the mountain was standing on the margin of the tarn, immediately opposite to her. She sat up and took her bundle and her lure, believing now that she must accept the unwelcome civility of an escort for the whole of the rest of the way, and thinking that she might as well make haste and get it over. The man approached, and took his seat on the huge stone beside her, crossed his arms, made no greeting, but looked her full in the face. She did not know the face, nor was it like any that she had ever seen. There was such long hair, and so much beard, that the eyes seemed the only feature which made any distinct impression. Erica's heart now began to beat violently, though wishing to be alone. She had not dreamed of being afraid till now, but now it occurred to her that she was seeing the rarest of sights, not seen twice in a century, no other than the mountain demon. She sprang to her feet and began to wade back through the high grass to the pathway, almost expecting to be seized by a strong hand, and cast into the unfathomable tarn, whose waters were said to well up from the center of the earth. Her companion, however, merely walked by her side, as he did not offer to carry her bundle. He could be no countryman of hers. They walked quietly on till the tarn was left some way behind. Erica found she was not to die that way. Presently, after she came in sight of a settlement of Laps, a cluster of low and dirty tents, round which some tame reindeer were feeding. Erica was not sorry to see these, though no one knew better than she the helpless cowardice of these people, and it was not easy to say what assistance they could afford against the mountain demon. Yet they were human beings, and would appear in answer to a cry. She involuntarily shifted her lure to be ready to utter a call. The stranger stopped to look at the distant tents, and Erica went on at the same pace. He presently overtook her, and pointed towards the Laps with an inquiring look. Erica only nodded. "Why you no speak?" growled the stranger in broken language. "Because I have nothing to say," declared Erica, in the sudden vivacity, inspired by the discovery that this was probably no demon. Her doubts were renewed, however, by the next question. "Is the bishop coming?" Now none were supposed to have a deeper interest in the holy bishop's travels than the evil spirits of any region through which he was to pass. "Yes, he is coming," replied Erica. "Are you afraid of him?" The stranger burst into a loud laugh at her question, and very like a mocking fiend, he looked as his thick beard parted to show his wide mouth with its 2 ranges of teeth. When he finished laughing, he said, No fear, bishop." "We," repeated Erica to herself, "he speaks for his tribe as well as himself." "We no fear, bishop," said the stranger, still laughing. "You no fear," and he pointed to the long stretch of pathed, prodigious ascent before them. Erica said there was nothing to fear on the mountain for those who did their duty to the powers, as it was her intention to do. Her first gamel cheese was to be for him whose due it was, and it should be the best she could make. This speech she thought would suit whatever might be the nature of her companion. If it was the demon, she could do no more to please him than promise him his cheese. Her companion seemed not to understand or attend to what she said. When Erica saw that she had no demon for a companion, but only a foreigner, she was so much relieved as not to be afraid at all. The stranger pointed to the tiny cove, in which Erlingson's farm might be seen looking no bigger than an infant's toy, and said, "Do you leave an enemy there, or is Hund now your friend?" "Hund is nobody's friend, unless he happens to be yours," Erica replied, perceiving at once that her companion belonged to the pirate's. "Hund is everybody's enemy, and above all he is an enemy to himself. He is a wretched man." "The bishop will cure that," said the stranger. "He is coward enough to call in the bishop, to cure all when comes the bishop." "Next week." "What day and what hour?" Erica did not choose to gratify so close a curiosity as this. She did not reply, and while silent was not sorry to hear the distant sound of cattle bells and Erlingson's cattle bells. Too, the stranger did not seem to notice the sound, even though quickening his pace to suit Erica's, who pressed on faster, when she believed protection was at hand. And yet the next thing the stranger said brought her to a full stop. He said he thought a part of Hund's business with the bishop would be to get him to disenchant the Fiord, so that boats might not be spirited away almost before men's eyes, and that a rower and his skiff might not sink like lead one day, and the man may be heard the second day, and seen the third, so that there was no satisfactory knowledge as to whether he was really dead. Erica stopped, and her eager looks made the inquiry which her lips could not speak. Her eagerness put her companion on his guard, and he would explain no further than by saying that the Fiord was certainly enchanted, and that strange tales were circulating all round its shores, very striking to a stranger. A stranger had nothing more to do with the wonders of a country than to listen to them. He wanted to turn the conversation back to Hund. Having found out that he was at Erlingson's, he next tried to discover what he had said and done since his arrival. Erica told the little there was to tell that he seemed full of sorrow and remorse. She told this in hope of a further explanation about drowned men being seen alive. But the stranger stopped when the bells were heard again, and a woman's voice singing nearer. Still, he complimented Erica on her courage, and turned to go back the way he came and walked away rapidly. The only thing now to be done was to run forwards. Erica forgot heat, weariness, and the safety of her property, and ran on towards the singing voice. In 5 minutes, she found the singer Frolic lying along the ground and picking cloudberries, with which she was filling her basket for supper. "Where is Erlingson?" Quick, cried Erica. "My father, you may just see him with your good eyes up there." And Frolic pointed to a patch of verdure on a slope high up the mountain, where the gazer might just discern that there were haycocks standing, and 2 or 3 moving figures beside them. "Stiorna is there today besides Jan. They hope to finish this evening," said Frolic, "and so here I am all alone, and I am glad you have come to help me to have a good supper ready for them. Their hunger will beat all my berry-gathering." "You are alone," said Erica, discovering that it was well that the pirate had turned back. When he Roman 999, "You alone, and gathering berries, instead of having an eye on the cattle." "But why are your hands empty?" asked Frolic. "Who is to lend you clothes? And what will the cows say to your leaving your lure behind when you know they like it so much better than Stiorna's?" Erica returned for her bundle and lure, and then proceeded to an eminence where 2 or 3 of her cows were grazing, and there sounded her lure. She put her whole strength to it in hope that others besides the cattle might appear and answer, for she was really anxious to see her master. The peculiar and far from musical sounds spread wide over the pastures and up the slopes, and through the distant woods, so that the cattle of another cedar stood to listen, and her own cows began to move, leaving the sweetest tufts of grass, and rising up from their couches in the richest herbage, to converge towards the point, whence she called. The fair-off herdsman observed to his fellow that there was a new call among the pastures, and Erlingson on the upland desired Jan and Stiorna to finish cocking the hay, and began his descent to his cedar to learn whether Erica had brought any news from home. Long before he could appear, Frolic threw herself down at Erica's feet. "You want news," said Erica, avoiding as usual all conversation about her superstitions. "How will it please you that the bishop is coming?" "Very much, if we had any chance of seeing him. Very much, whether we see him or not. If he can give any help, any advice." "My poor Erica, I do not like to ask, but you have had no good news, I fear." Erica shook her head. "I saw that in your face in a moment. Do not speak about it till you tell my father. He may help you. I cannot, so do not tell me anything." Erica was glad to take her at her word. She kissed Frolic's hand, which lay on her knee, in token of thanks, and then inquired whether any gamel cheese was made yet. "No," said Frolic, inwardly sighing for news. "We have the whey, but not sweet cream enough, till after this evening's milking, so you are just in time." Erica was glad, as she could not otherwise have been sure of the demon having his due. "There is your father," said Erica. "Now do go, and gather more berries, Frolic, there are not half enough." It may be supposed that Erlingson was anxious to be at home. When he had heard Erica's story, he was not to be detained by any promise of berries and cream for supper. He put away the thought even of his hay yet unfinished on the upland, and would hear nothing that Frolic had to say of his fatigue at the end of a long working day. He took some provision with him, drank off a glass of corn brandy, and set off at a good pace down the mountain. Scarcely a word was spoken, though the mountain dairies have the reputation of being the merriest places in the world, till Erica and Frolic were about their cheese-making the next morning. Erica had rather have kept the cattle, but Frolic so earnestly begged that she would let Stiorna do that, as she could not destroy the cattle in her ill humor, while she might easily spoil the cheese. That Erica put away her knitting tied on her apron, tucked up her sleeves, and prepared for the great work. Frolic, said Erica, "is the cream good?" Stiorna would say that the demon will smack his lips over it. Come and taste. "Do not speak so, dear. I was only quoting Stiorna." "What are you saying about me?" inquired Stiorna, appearing at the door. "Only talking about the cream. And the cheese, are you sure of that? Bless me, what a smell of the yellow flowers! It will be a prime cheese." "How can you leave the cattle?" Stiorna cried. "Erica, if they are all gone when you get back." "Well, come then, and see the sight." "I get scolded either way. Always you would have scolded me finely tonight, if I had not called you to see the sight." "What sight?" "Why, there is such a procession of boats on the Fiord that you would suppose there were 3 weddings happening at once." "What can we do?" exclaimed Frolic dolefully, looking at the cream, which had reached such a point that the stirring could not cease for a minute, without risk of spoiling the cheese. Erica took the long wooden spoon from Frolic's hand, and bade her run and see where the bishop, for no doubt it was the bishop, was going to land. The cream should not spoil while she was absent. Frolic bounded away over the grass, declaring that if it was the bishop going to her father's, she could not possibly stay on the mountain for all the cheeses in Nordland. Erica remained alone, patiently stirring the cream, and hardly heeding the heat of the fire, while planning how the bishop would be told her story, and how he would examine Hund, and perhaps be able to give some news of the pirates, and certainly be ready with his advice. Some degree of hope arose within her, as she thought of the esteem in which all Norway held the wisdom and kindness of the Bishop of Trondheim. And then again, she felt it hard to be absent during the visit of the only person to whom she looked for comfort. Frolic returned after a long while to defer her hopes. A little the boats had all drawn to shore on the northern side of the Fiord, where no doubt the bishop had a visit to pay before proceeding to Erlingson's. The cheese-making might yet be done in time, even if Frolic should be sent for from home to see, and be seen by the good bishop. The day after Erica's departure to the dairy pedder was sitting alone in his house, weaving a frail basket. He sighed to think how empty and silent the house appeared. Erica's light, active step was gone. Rolf's hearty laugh was silent. Perhaps for ever Otto was an inmate still, but Otto was much altered of late, and who could wonder? From the hour of Hund's return, the boy had hardly been heard to speak. All these thoughts were too melancholy for old Pedder, and to break the silence he began to sing as he wove his basket. He had nearly got through a ballad of 105 stanzas, when he heard a footstep on the floor. "Otto, my boy," said he, "surely you are in early. Can it be dinner time yet?" "No, not this hour," replied Otto in a low voice which sank to a whisper, as he said, "I have left Hund laying the troughs to water the meadow for, and if he misses me, I don't care. I could not stay, I could not help coming, and if he kills me for telling you, he may foretell you I must." And Otto went to close and fasten the door, and then he sat down on the ground, rested his arms on his grandfather's knees, and told his story in such a low tone that no little bird under the eaves could carry the matter. "Oh, grandfather, what a mind that fellow has! He will go crazy with horror soon. I am not sure that he is not crazy now. He has murdered Rolf, has he? I can't be sure. He is like one bewitched that cannot hold his tongue. While I was bringing the troughs one by one for him to lay where the meadow was driest, he still kept muttering, and muttering to himself. As often as I came within 6 yards of him, I heard him mutter. Then, when I helped him to lay the troughs, he began to talk to me. I was not in the mind to make him many answers, but on he went just the same as if I had asked him 100 questions. It was such an opportunity for a curious boy that I wonder you did not." Perhaps I might if he had stopped long enough. But if he stopped for a moment to wipe his brow, for he was all trembling with the heat, he began again. Before I could well speak, he asked me whether I had ever heard that drowned men could show their heads above water, and stare with their eyes, and throw their arms about a whole days after they were drowned. I indeed did he ask that. Yes, and several other things. He asked whether I had ever heard that the islets in the Fiord were so many prison houses. And what did you say? I wanted him to explain, so I said they were prison houses to the eiderducks when they were sitting, for they never stir a yard from their nests. But he did not heed a word I spoke. He went on about drowned men being kept prisoners in the islets, moaning, because they can't get out, and he says they will knock as if they could cleave the thick hard rock. What do you think of all this, my boy? Why, when I said I had not heard a word of any such thing even from my grandmother or Erica, he declared he had heard the moans, himself moaning and crying. But then he mixed up something about the barking of wolves that made confusion in the story, though he had been hot just before there. He stood shivering as if it was winter as he stood in the broiling sun. Then I asked him if he had seen dead men swim and stare, as he said he had heard them moan and cry. And what did he say then? He started bolt upright, as if I had been picking his pocket. He was in a passion for a minute, I know, if ever he was in his life. Then he tried to laugh, as he said what a lot of new stories of spirits, such stories as people love, should have to carry home to the north, whenever he went back to his own place. In the north, his own place in the north, he wanted to mislead you there, boy. Hund was born some way to the south. No, was he really? How is one to believe a word he says, except when he speaks as if he was in his sleep, straight out from his conscience? I suppose. He began to talk about the bishop, next wanting to know when I thought he would come, and whether he was apt to hold private talk with every sort of person at the houses he stayed at. How did you answer him? You know nothing about the bishop's visits. At the end of a ledge, he found the remains of a ladder made of birch poles. So I told him, but to try him, I said I knew one thing, that a quantity of fresh fish would be wanted when the bishop comes with his train, and I asked him whether he would go fishing with me as soon as we could hear that the bishop was drawing near. He would not agree to that, I fancy. He asked how far out I thought of going. Of course, I said to Vogel Islet, at least as far as Vogel Islet. Do you know, grandfather, I thought he would have knocked me down at the word. He muttered something I could not hear what to get off. By that time, we were laying the last trough. I asked him to go for some more, and the minute he was out of sight I scampered here. Now what sort of a mind do you think this fellow has? Not an easy one, it is plain. It is too clear also that he thinks Rolf is drowned. But do you think so, grandfather? Do you think so, grandson? Not a bit of it, depend upon it. Rolf is all alive if he is swimming and staring and throwing his arms about in the water. I think I see him now, and I will see him if he is to be seen alive or dead. And pray how? I ought to have said, if you will help me. You say sometimes, grandfather, that you can pull a good stroke with the oar still, and I can steer as well as our master himself. And the Fiord never was stiller than it is today. Think what it would be to bring home Rolf, or some good news of him. We would have a race up to the cedar afterwards, to see who could be the first to tell Erica. Gently, gently, boy, what is Rolf about not to come home if he is alive? That we shall learn from him. Did you hear that he told Erica he should go as far as Vogel Islet, dropping something about being safe there from pirates and everything? Petter really thought there was something in this. He sent off Otto to his work in the little meadow, and himself sought out Madame Erlingson, who, having less belief in spirits and enchantments than Petter, was in proportion more struck with the necessity of seeing whether there was any meaning in Hund's revelations, lest Rolf should be perishing for want of help. The story of his disappearance had spread through the whole region, and there was not a fisherman on the Fiord who had not by this time given an opinion as to how he was drowned, but Madame was well aware that if he were only wrecked, there was no sign that he could make that would not terrify the superstitious minds of the neighbors, and make them keep aloof instead of helping him. In addition to all this, it was doubtful whether his signals would be seen by anybody at a season when everyone who could be spared was gone up to the dairies. As soon as Hund was gone out after dinner, the old man and his grandson put off in the boat, carrying a note from Madame Erlingson to her neighbors along the Fiord, requesting the assistance of one or two rowers. On an occasion which might prove one of life and death, the neighbors were obliging, so that the boat was soon in fast career down the Fiord. Otto, full of expectation and of pride in commanding such an expedition, and Petter being relieved from all necessity of rowing more than he liked. Otto had found occasionally the truth of a common proverb had easily brought his master's horses to the water, but could not make them drink. He now found that he had easily got rowers into the boat, but that it was impossible to make them row beyond a certain point. He had used as much discretion as Petter himself about not revealing the precise place of their destination, and when Vogel Islet came in sight, the two helpers at once gave him hints to steer so as to keep as near the shore and as far from the island as possible. Otto gravely steered for the island. Notwithstanding, when the men saw that this was his resolution, they shipped their oars and refused to strike another stroke. Unless one of them might steer, that island had a bad reputation. It was betwitched or haunted, and in that direction the men would not go. They were willing to do all they could to oblige. They would row 20 miles without resting with pleasure, but they would not brave Nipon, nor any other demon for any consideration. "How far off is it?" Otto asked Petter. 2 miles, grandfather. Can you and I manage it by ourselves, think you? "Aye, surely, if we can land these friends of ours, they will wait ashore till we call for them again." "I will leave you my supper, if you will wait for us here on this headland," said Otto to the man. The men could make no other objection than that they were certain the boat would never return. They were very civil, would not accept Otto's supper on any account, would remain on the watch. Wished their friends would be persuaded, and when they found all persuasion in vain, declared they would bear testimony to Erica, and as long as they should live, to the bravery of the old man and boy who thus threw away their lives in search of a comrade who had fallen a victim to Nipon. Amidst these friendly words, the old man and his grandson put off once more alone, making straight for the islet of the two. Petter was the greater hero, for he saw the most ground for fear. "Promise me," Otto said, he, "not to take advantage of my not seeing. As sure as you observe anything strange, tell me exactly what you see." "I will, grandfather. There is nothing yet, but what is so beautiful that I could not for the life of me find out anything to be afraid of." Otto rowed stoutly too for some way, and then he stopped to ask on what side the remains of a birch ladder used to hang down, as Petter had often told him. "On the north side, but there is no use in looking for that, my boy. That birch ladder must have rotted away with frost and wet long and long ago." "It is likely," said Otto, "but thinking that some man must have put it there, I should like to see whether it really is impossible for one with a strong hand and light foot to mount this wall. I brought our longest boathook on purpose to try where a ladder hung before a foot must have climbed, and if I mount, Rolf may have mounted before me." It chilled Petter's heart to remember the aspect of the precipice which his boy talked of climbing, but he said nothing, feeling that it would be in vain. This forbearance touched Otto's feelings. "I will run into no folly, trust me," said he. "I do not forget that you depend on me for getting home, and that the truth about Nipon and such things depends for an age to come on our being seen at home again safe. But I have a pretty clear notion that Rolf is somewhere on the top there. Suppose you call him then." Otto had much rather catch him. He pictured to himself the pride and pleasure of mastering the ascent, the delight of surprising Rolf asleep in his solitude, and the fun of standing over him to waken him and witness his surprise. He could not give up the attempt to scale the rock, but he would do it very cautiously. Slowly and watchfully, they passed round the islet, Otto seeking with his eye any ledge of the rock on which he might mount, pulling off his shoes that his bare feet might have the better hold, and stripping off almost all his clothes for lightness in climbing and perhaps swimming. He clambered up to more than one promising spot, and then, finding that further progress was impossible, had to come down again. At last, seeing a narrow chasm filled with leafy shrubs, he determined to try how high he could reach by means of these. He swung himself up by means of a bush which grew downwards, having its roots firmly fixed in a crevice of the rock. This gave him hold of another which brought him in reach of a third, so that, making his way like a squirrel or a monkey, he found himself hanging at such a height that it seemed easier to go on than to turn back. For some time after leaving his grandfather, he had spoken to him as an assurance of his safety. When too far off to speak, he had sung aloud to save the old man from fears, and now that he did not feel at all sure whether he should ever get up or down, he began to whistle cheerily. He was pleased to hear it answered from the boat. The thought of the old man sitting there alone, and his return wholly depending upon the safety of his companion, animated Otto afresh to find a way up the rock. It looked to him as like a wall as any other rock about the islet. There was no footing where he was looking, that was certain. So he advanced farther into the chasm, Where the rocks so nearly met that a giant's arm might have touched the opposite wall here, there was promise of release from his dangerous situation at the end of a ledge. He saw something like poles hanging on the rocksome work of human hands, certainly having scrambled towards them. He found the remains of a ladder made of birch poles, fastened together with thongs of leather. This ladder had once no doubt hung from top to bottom of the chasm, and its lower part now gone, was that ladder of which Petter had often spoken as a proof that men had been on the island. With a careful hand Otto pulled at the ladder, and it did not give way. He tugged harder, and still it only shook. He must try it, there was nothing else to be done. It was well for him now that he was used to dangerous climbing, that he had had adventures on the slippery cracked glaciers of Sulightmond, that being on a height with precipices below was no new situation to him. He climbed, trusting as little as possible to the ladder, setting his foot in preference on any projection of the rock, or any root of the smallest shrub. More than one pole cracked, more than one fastening gave way. When he had barely time to shift his weight upon a better support, he heard his grandfather's voice calling, and he could not answer. It disturbed him now that his joints were strained, his limbs trembling, and his mouth parched so that his breath rattled as it came. He reached the top, however. He sprang from the edge of the precipice, unable to look down, threw himself on his face, and panted and trembled, as if he had never before climbed anything less safe than a staircase. Never before, indeed, had he done anything like this. The feat was performed. Islet was not to him inaccessible. This thought gave him strength. He sprang to his feet again, and whistled loud and shrill. He could imagine the comfort this must be to Petter, and he whistled more and more merrily, till he found himself rested enough to proceed on his search for Rolf. He went briskly on his way, not troubling himself with any thoughts of how he was to get down again. Never had he seen a place so full of waterbirds, and their nests strewed all the ground, and they themselves were strutting and waddling, fluttering and vociferating in every direction. They were perfectly tame, knowing nothing of men, and having had no experience of disturbance. The ducks that were leading their broods allowed Otto to stroke their feathers, and the drakes looked on without taking any offense. If Rolf is here, thought Otto, he has been living on most amiable terms with his neighbors. After an anxious thought or two of night, after a glance or two round the sky and shores for a sign of wind, Otto began in earnest his quest of Rolf. He called his name gently, then louder. There was some kind of answer, some sound of human voice he heard, he was certain, but so muffled, so dull, that whence it came, he could not tell. It might even be his grandfather calling from below. So he crossed to quite the verge of the little island, wishing with all his heart that the birds would be quiet, and cease their civility of all answering. When he spoke, when quite out of hearing of Petter, Otto called again with scarcely a hope of any result. So plain was it to his eyes that no one resided on the island. On its small summit there was really no intermission of birds' nests, no space where anyone had lain down, no sign of habitation, no vestige of food, dress, or utensils. With a saddened heart, therefore, Otto called again, and again. He was sure there was an answer, though whence and what he could not make out. He then sang a part of a chant that he had learnt by Rolf. Singing it, as he sat carving his share of the new pulpit, he stopped in the middle, and presently believed that he heard the air continued, though the voice seemed so indistinct, and the music so much as if it came from underground, that Otto began to recall with some doubt and fear the stories of the enchantment of the place. It was not long before he heard a cry from the water below. Looking over the precipice, he saw what made him draw back in terror. He saw the very thing Hund had described, the swimming and staring head of Rolf, and the arms thrown up in the air. Not having Hund's conscience, however, and having much more curiosity, he looked again, and then a third time. "Are you Rolf, really?" asked he at last. "Yes, but who are you, Otto, or the demon up there where nobody can climb? Who are you?" "I will show you. We will find each other out," thought Otto, with a determination to take the leap and ascertain the truth. He leaped and struck the water at a sufficient distance from Rolf. When he came up again, they approached each other staring, and each with some doubt as to whether the other was human or a demon. "Are you really alive, Rolf?" said the one. "To be sure I am, Otto," said the other, "but what demon carried you to the top of that rock that no man ever climbed?" Otto looked mysterious, suddenly resolving to keep his secret for the "Not that way," said Rolf. "I have not the strength I had, and I can't swim round the place now. I was just resting myself when I heard you call, and came out to see. Follow me home." He turned and began to swim homewards. Otto had the strongest inclination to go with him, to see what would be revealed. But there were two objections: his grandfather must be growing anxious, and he was not perfectly sure yet whether his guide might not be Nipon in Rolf's likeness, about to lead him to some hidden prison. "Give me your hand, Rolf," said the boy bravely. It was a real, substantial, warm hand. "I don't wonder you doubt," said Rolf. "I can't look much like Meisel Funshaven, and shrunk and haggard as my face must be." Otto was now quite satisfied, and he told of the boat. And his grandfather. The boat was scarcely farther off than the cave, and poor Rolf was almost in extremity, for drink the water and brandy he brought with him had been finished nearly 2 days, and he was suffering extremely from thirst. He thought he could reach the boat, and Otto led the way, bidding him not mind his being without clothes till they could find him some. Glad was the old man to hear his boy's call from the water, and his face lighted up with wonder and pleasure. When he heard that Rolf was not far behind, he lent a hand to help him into the boat, and asked no questions, till he had given him food and drink. He reproached himself for having brought neither camphor nor a safetida to administer with the corn brandy. Here was the brandy, however, and some water and fish and bread. And Cloudberry's great was the amazement of Petter and Otto at Rolf's pushing aside the brandy, and seizing the water when he had drained the last drop. He even preferred the cloudberries to the brandy. A transient doubt thence occurred whether this was Rolf. After all, Rolf saw it in their faces and laughed, and when they had heard his story of what he had suffered from thirst, they were quite satisfied, and wondered no longer. He was all impatience to be gone. It tried him more now to think how long it would be before Erica could hear of his preservation, than to bear all that had gone before, being without clothes. However, it was necessary to visit the cave, and bring away what was there. In truth, Otto was not sorry for this. His curiosity about the cave was so great, that he felt it impossible to go home without seeing it, and the advantage of holding the secret knowledge of such a place was one which he would not give up. He seized an oar, gave another to Rolf, and they were presently off the mouth of the cave. Petter sighed at their having to leave him again, but he believed what Rolf said of there being no danger, and of their remaining clothes at hand. One or the other came popping up beside the boat every minute with clothes or net or lines or brandiflask, and finally with the oars of the poor broken skiff, being obliged to leave the skiff itself behind. Rolf did not forget to bring away whole handfuls of beautiful shells, which he had amused himself with collecting for Erica. At last they entered the boat again, and while they were dressing, Otto charmed his grandfather with a description of the cave, off the dark-sounding walls, the lofty roof, and the green tide breaking on the white sands. It almost made the listener cool to hear of these things. But as Otto had remarked, the heat had abated. It was near midnight, and the sun was going to set. Their row to the shore would be in the cool twilight, and then they should take in companions who, fresh from rest, would save them the trouble of rowing home. When all were too tired to talk, and the oars were dipping somewhat lazily, and the breeze had died away, and the seabirds were quiet, old Petter, who appeared to his companions to be asleep, raised his head and said, "I heard a sob. Are you crying, Otto?" "Yes, grandfather." "What is your grief, my boy?" "No grief, anything but grief now. I have felt more grief than you know of, though, or anybody. I did not know it fully myself till now." "Right, my boy, and right to say it out too. I don't care now. Who knows how miserable I have been. I did not believe all the time that Nipon had anything to do with these misfortunes." "Right, Otto," exclaimed Rolf now. "But I was not quite cert, and how could I say a word against it when I was the one to provoke Nipon? Now Rolf is safe and Erica will be happy again, and I shall not feel as if everybody's eyes were upon me, and know that it is only out of kindness that they do not reproach me as having done all the mischief. I shall hold up my head again. Noah's. Some may think I have done all along, but I did not in my own eyes, no, not in my own eyes, for all these weary days that are gone." "Well, they are gone now," said Rolf. "Let them go by and be forgot." "Nay, not forgotten," said Petter. "How is my boy to learn if he forgets?" "Don't fear that for me, grandfather," said Otto, as the tears still streamed down his face. "No fear of that. I shall not forget these last days, no, not as long as I live." The comrades who were waiting and watching on the point were duly amazed to see 3 heads in the boat on her return, and duly delighted to find that the third was Rolf alive, and no ghost. They asked question upon question, and Rolf answered some fully and truly, while he showed reserve upon others, and at last, when closely pressed, he declared himself too much exhausted to talk, and begged permission to lie down in the bottom of the boat and sleep. Upon this a long silence ensued. It lasted till the farmhouse was in sight, at which one of the rowers was to be landed. Otto then exclaimed, I wonder what we all have been thinking about. We have not settled a single thing about what is to be said, and done, and here, we are almost in sight of home, and Hun's cunning eyes. I have settled all about it, replied Rolf, raising himself up from the bottom of the boat, where they all thought he had been sleeping soundly. My mind said he is quite clear. The first thing I have decided upon is that I may rely on the honor of our friends here to say nothing, yet you have proved your kindness, friends, in coming on this expedition, but for which I should have died in my hole like a superannuated bear in its den. This is a story that the whole country will hear of, and our grandchildren will tell it on winter nights, when there is talk of the war that brought the pirates on our coasts. The best way will be for you to set me ashore some way short of home, and ask Erlingson to meet me at the Black Tarn. There cannot be a quieter place, and I shall be so far on my way to the Cedar. If you will just make a looking-glass of the Black Tarn, said Otto, you will see that you have no business to carry such a face as yours to the Cedar. Erica will die of terror at you, for the mountain demon, before you can persuade her. It is only you. I was thinking, observed one of the rowers, who relished the idea of going down to posterity in a wonderful story. I was just thinking that your wisest way will be to take a rest in my bed at Hallberg's, without anybody knowing, and shave yourself with my razor, and dress in my Sunday clothes, and show yourself to your betrothed in such a trim as that she will be glad to see you. Do so, Rolf urged Petter. Everybody said do so, and agreed that Erica would suffer far less by remaining 5 or 6 hours longer in her present state of mind than by seeing her lover look like a ghastly savage, or perhaps hearing that he was lying by the roadside dying of his exertions to reach her. Rolf tried to laugh at all this, but he could not contradict it. All took place as it was settled in the boat before the people on a neighbor's farm had come in to breakfast. Rolf was snug in bed with a large pitcher of whey by the bedside to quench his still insatiable thirst. No one but the neighbors knew of his being there, and he got away unseen in the afternoon, rested, shaven, and dressed so as to look more like himself, though still haggard. Packing his old clothes into a bundle which he carried with a stick over his shoulder, and laden with nothing else but a few rye cakes and a flask of the everlasting corn brandy, he set forth, thanking his hosts very heartily for their care, and somewhat mysteriously assuring them that they would hear something soon, and that meantime they had better not have to be sought far from home. As he expected, he met no one whom he knew. 9/10 of the neighbors were far away on the Cedars, and of the small remainder, almost all were attending the bishop on the opposite shore of the lake. Rolf shook his head at every deserted farmhouse that he passed, thinking how the pirates might ransack the dwellings if they should happen to discover that few inhabitants remained in them, but those whose limbs were too old to climb the mountain. He shook his head again when he thought what consternation he might spread through these dwellings by dropping at the doors the news of how near the pirate schooner lay. It seemed to be out of the people's minds now, because it was out of sight, and the bishop had become visible instead. As for the security which some talked of from their being so little worth taking in the Nordland farmhouses, this might be true if only one house was to be attacked and that one defended, but half a dozen ruffians coming ashore to search 8 or 10 undefended houses in a day might gather enough booty to pay them for their trouble of money. They would find little or none. But in some families, there were gold chains, crosses, and earrings, which had come down from a remote generation, or silver goblets and tankards. There were goats worth carrying away for their milk, and spirited horses and their harness to sell at a distance. There were stores of the finest bed and table linen in the world, sacks of flour cellars, full of ale, kegs of brandy, and a mass of tobacco in every house. Fervently did Rolf wish, as he passed by these comfortable dwellings, that the enemy would cast no eye or thought upon their comforts, till he should have given such information in the proper quarters as should deprive them of the power of doing mischief in this neighborhood. The breeze blew in his face, refreshing him with its coolness, and with the fragrance of the birch with which it was loaded. But it brought something else, a transient sound, which surprised Rolf. Voices of men, who seemed, if he could judge from so rapid a hint, to be talking. Angrily he began to consider whom besides Otto Elringson could have thought it safe or necessary to bring with him, or whether it was somebody met with by chance. At all events, it would be wisest not to show himself, and to approach with all possible caution cautiously. Therefore he drew near, keeping a vigilant watch all around, and ready to pop down into the grass on any alarm. Being unable to see anyone near the tarn, he was convinced the talkers must be seated under the crags on its margin, and he therefore made a circuit to get behind the rocks, and then climbed a huge fragment which seemed to have been toppled down from some steep and to have rolled to the brink of the water, two stunted pines grew out from the summit of this crag, and between these pines, Rolf placed himself and looked down from thence. Two men sat on the ground in the shadow of the rock. One was Hund, and the other must undoubtedly be one of the pirate crew. His dress, arms, and broken language all showed him to be so. And it was in fact the same man that Erica had met near the same place, though that she had had such an adventure, was the last thing her lover dreamed of, as he surveyed the man's figure from above. This man appeared surly. Hund was extremely agitated. "It is very hard," said he, "when all I want is to do no harm to anybody, neither to my old friends, nor my new acquaintances, that I cannot be let alone. I have done too much mischief in my life, already. The demons have made sport of me. It is their sport that I have as many lives to answer for as any man of twice my age in Nordland, and now that I would be harmless for the rest of my days." "Don't trouble yourself to talk about your days," interrupted the pirate. "They will be too few to be worth speaking of, if you do not put yourself under our orders again. You are a deserter, and, as a deserter, you go back with me, unless you choose to go as a comrade." "And what might I expect that your orders would be if I went with you? You know very well that we want you for a guide. That is all you are worth in a fight. You would only be in the way unless, indeed, you could contrive to get out of the way. Then you would not expect me to fight against my master and his people. Nobody was ever so foolish as to expect you to fight more or less. I should think your business would be to pilot us to Erlingson's and answer truly all our questions about their ways and doings. Surprise them in their sleep," muttered Hund, "wake them up with the light of their own burning roofs. And they would know me by that light. They would point me out to the bishop. They would find time in their hurry to mark me for the monster they might well think me." "Yes, you would be in the front, of course," observed the pirate. "But there is one comfort for you. If you are so earnest to see the bishop, as you told me, my plan is the best. When once we lock him down on board our schooner, you can have him all to yourself. You can confess your sins to him the whole day long, for nobody else will want a word with either of you. You can show him your enchanted island down in the Fiord, and see if he can lay the ghost for you." In desperation, Hund unarmed, as he was threw himself upon the pirate. Hund sprang to his feet, in an agony of passion. The well-armed pirate was up as soon as Rolf drew back 2 paces to be out of sight, if by chance they should look up, and armed himself with a heavy stone. He heard the pirate say, "You can try to run away, if you like. I shall shoot you through the head before you have gone 5 yards, and you may refuse to return with me, and then I shall know how to report of you to my captain. I shall tell him that you are lying at the bottom of this lacave. It has a bottom with a stone tied round your neck, like a drowned wildcat. I hope you may chance to find your enemy there to make the place the pleasanter." Rolf could not resist the impulse to send his heavy stone into the middle of the tarn, to see the effect upon the men below. He gave a good cast on the very instant, and prodigious was the splash as the stone hit the water precisely in the middle of the little lake. The men did not see the cause of the commotion that followed, but staring and turning at the splash, they saw the rings spreading in the dark waters which had lain as still as the heavens but a moment before. How could 2 guilty superstitious men doubt that the waters were thrown into agitation by the pirate's last words? Yet they glanced fearfully round the whole landscape. Far and near they saw no living thing, but a hawk which, startled from its perch on a scathed pine, was wheeling round in the air in an unsteady flight. The pirate pointed to the bird with one hand, while he laid the other on the pistol in his belt. "Yes," said Hund, trembling. "The bird saw it." "Did you see it?" "See what?" "The water sprite, Uldra. Before you throw me into the water sprite, we will see which is the strongest." And in desperation, Hund, unarmed, as he was threw himself upon the pirate, sprang at his throat, and both wrestled with all their force. Rolf could not but look, and he saw that the pirate had drawn forth his pistol, and that all would be over with Hund in a moment if he did not interfere. He stood forward between the 2 pine stems on the ridge of the rock, and uttered very loud the mournful cry which had so terrified his enemies at Vogel Islet. The combatants flew asunder, as if parted by a flash of lightning. Both looked up to the point whence the sound had come, and there they saw what they supposed to be Rolf's spectre pointing at them, and the eyes staring as when looking up from the waters of the Fiord. How could these guilty and superstitious men doubt that it was Rolf's spectre, which, rising through the center of the tarn, had caused the late commotion in its waters? Away they fled at first in different directions, but it amused Rolf to observe that rather than be alone, Hund turned to follow the track of the tyrant, who had just been threatening and insulting him, and driving him to struggle for his life. I thought, Rolf, it is his conscience that makes me so much more terrible to him than that ruffian. I never hurt a hair of his head. And yet, through his conscience, my face is worse than the blasting lightning to his eyes. Hey-ho, where is Erlingson? It is nothing short of cruel to keep me waiting today of all days, and in this spot of all place, almost within sight of the cedar, where my poor Erica sits pining, and seeing nothing of the pastures, but only with her mind's eye the seascapes, where she thinks these limbs are stretched cold and helpless, as in a grave. A pretty story, I shall have to tell her, if she will only believe it, of another sort of sea cave. To pass the time he took out the shells he had collected for Erica, and admired them afresh, and planned where she would place them so as best to adorn their sitting room. When they were married, Erlingson arrived before he had been thus engaged 5 minutes, and indeed, before he had been more than a quarter of an hour altogether at the place of meeting. "My dear master," exclaimed Rolf on seeing him coming, "have pity on Erica, and me, and hear what I have to tell you, that I may be gone." "You shall be gone at once, my good fellow. I will walk with you, and you shall tell your story as we go." Rolf shook his head, and objected that he could not in conscience take Erlingson a step further from home than was necessary, as he was only too much wanted there. "Is that Otto yonder?" he asked. "He said you would bring him." "Yes, he has grown trustworthy of late. We have had fewer heads and hands among us than the times require since Petter grew old and blind, and you were missing, and Hund had to be watched instead of trusted. So we have been obliged to make a man of Otto, though he has the years of a boy, and the curiosity of a woman. I brought him now, thinking that a messenger might be wanted to raise the country against the pirates, and I believe Otto in his present mood will be as sure as we know he can be swift." "It is well we have a messenger. Where is the bishop?" "Just going to his boat at this moment." "I doubt not," replied Erlingson, measuring with his eye the length of the shadows. "The bishop is to sup with us this evening." "And how long to stay?" "Over tomorrow night at the least, if many of the neighbors should bring their business to him. It may be longer. My little frolic will be vexed that he should come while she is absent. Indeed, I should not much wonder if she sets out homeward when she hears the news you will carry, so that we shall see her at breakfast." "It is more likely," observed Rolf, "that we shall see the bishop up the mountain at breakfast. Ah, you stare. But you will find I am not out of my wits when you hear what has come to my knowledge since we parted, and especially within this hour." Erlingson was indeed presently convinced that it was the intention of the pirates to carry off the Bishop of Trondheim, in order that his ransom might make up to them for the poverty of the coasts. He heard besides such an ample detail of the plundering practices which Rolf had witnessed from his retreat, as convinced him that the strangers, though in great force, must be prevented by a vigorous effort from doing further mischief. The first thing to be done was to place the bishop in safety on the mountain, and the next was so to raise the country as that these pirates should be certainly taken when they should come within reach. Otto was called, and entrusted with the information which had to be conveyed to the magistrate at Saltdalen. He carried his master's tobacco pouch as a tokenthes pouch of Lapland, make being well known to the magistrate, as Erlingson's Otto was to tell him of the danger of the bishop, and to request him to send to the spot whatever force could be mustered at Saltdalen, and moreover, to issue the Budstick 5 to raise the country. The pirates, having once entered the upper reach of the Fiord, might thus be prevented from ever going back again, and from annoying any more the neighborhood which they had so long infested. Erlingson promised to be wary on his return homewards, so as not to fall in with the two whom Rolf had put to flight. He said, however, that if by chance he should cross their path, he did not doubt he could also make them run by acting the ghost or demon. Though he had not had Rolf's advantage of disappearing in the Fiord before their eyes, they were already terrified enough to fly from anything that called itself a ghost. The three then went on their several ways, Otto speeding over the ridges like a sprite on a night errand, and Rolf striding up the grassy slopes like what he was, a lover anxious to be beside his betrothed after a perilous absence. This was the day when the first cheese of the season was found to be perfect and complete. Frolic Stiorna and Erica examined it carefully, and pronounced it a well-pressed excellent gamel cheese, such as they should not be ashamed to set before the bishop, and therefore one which ought to satisfy the demon. It now only remained to carry it to its destination, to the ridge, where the first cheese of the season was always laid for the demon, and where it appeared he regularly came for his offering, as no vestige of the gift was ever to be found the next morning. Only the round place in the grass where it had lain, and the marks of some feet which had trodden the herbage. "Help me up with it upon my head, Stiorna," said Erica. I know why you will not let me carry the cheese, said Frolic, smiling. You are thinking of Otto with the cake and ale, nobody. But you must deposit offerings henceforward. You are afraid I should eat up that cheese almost as heavy as myself. You think there would not be a paring left for the demon by the time I got to the ridge. Not so, replied Erica. I think that he to whom this cheese is destined had rather be served by one who does not laugh at him, and it is a safer plan for you, Frolic. And off went Erica with her cheese. The ridge on which she laid it would have tempted her at any other time to sit down. It was green and soft with mosses, and offered as comfortable a couch to one tired with the labors of the day as any to be found at the farm. But tonight it was to be haunted, so Erica merely stayed to do her duty. She selected the softest tuft of moss, on which to lay the cheese, put her offering reverently down, and then diligently gathered the brightest blossoms from the herbage around, and strewed them over the cheese. She then walked rapidly homewards, without once looking behind her. If she had had the curiosity and courage to watch for a little while, she would have seen her offering carried off by an odd little figure, with nothing very terrible in its appearance, namely, a woman about 4 feet high, with a flat face, and eyes wide apart, wearing a reindeer garment like a wagoner's frock, a red comforter about her neck, a red cloth cap on her head, a blue worsted sash, and leather boots up to the knee. In short, such a Lapland girl as Erica would have given a rye cake to as charity, but would not have thought of asking to sit down even in her master's kitchen, for the Norwegian servants are very high and saucy towards the Lapps who wander to their doors. It is not surprising that the Lapps who pitch their tents on the mountain should like having a fine gamel cheese for the trouble of picking it up. And the company whose tents Erica had passed on her way up to the cedar kept a good lookout upon all the dairy people round, and carried off every cheese meant for the demon. While Erica was gathering and strewing the blossoms, this girl was hidden near, and trusting to Erica's not looking behind her, the rogue swept off the blossoms, and threw them at her. Before she had gone 10 yards, trundled the cheese down the other side of the ridge, made a circuit, and was at the tents with her prize before supper time. What would Erica have thought if she had beheld this fruit of so many milkings and skimmings, so much boiling and pressing, devoured by greedy Lapps in their dirty tent? On her way homewards, Erica remembered that this was Midsummer Eve, a season when her mother was in her thoughts more than at any other time, for Midsummer Eve is sacred in Norway to the wooddeman, whose victim she believed her mother to have been. Every woodman sticks his axe into a tree that night, that the demon may, if he pleases, begin the work of the year by felling trees, or making a faggot. Erica hastened to the cedar to discover whether Erlingson had left his axe behind, and whether Jan had one with him. Jan had an axe, and remembering his duty, though tired and sleepy, was just going to the nearest pine grove with it. When Erica reached home, she seized Erlingson's axe, and went also and stuck it in a tree just within the verge of the grove, which was in that part a thicket from the growth of underwood. This thicket was so near the back of the dairy that the two were home in 5 minutes, yet they found Frolic almost as impatient as if they had been gone an hour. She asked whether their heathen worship was done at last, so that all might go to bed, or whether they were to be kept awake till midnight by more mummery. Erica replied by showing that Jan was already gone to his loft over the shed, and begging leave to comb and curl Frolic's hair, and see her to rest at once. Stiorna was asleep, and Erica herself meant to watch the cattle this night. They lay crouched in the grass all near each other, and within view in the mild slanting sunshine, and here she intended to sit on the bench outside the homished, and keep her eye on them till morning. You are thinking of the Bishop of Trondheim's cattle, said Frolic. I am, dear. This is Midsummer Eve, you know, when, as we think, all the spirits love to be abroad. You will die before your time, Erica, said the weary girl. These spirits give you no rest of body or mind. What a day's work we have done, and now you are going to watch till 2 o'clock. I could not keep awake, she said, yawning. If there was one demon at the head of the bed, and another at the foot, and the underground people running like mice all over the floor. Then go and sleep, dear. I will fetch your comb, if you will just keep an eye on the cattle for the moment I am gone. As Erica combed Frolic's long fair hair, and admired its shine in the sunlight, and twisted it up behind and curled it on each side, the weary girl leaned her head against her, and dropped asleep. When all was done, she just opened her eyes to find her way to bed and say, You may as well go to bed comfortably, for you will certainly drop asleep here if you don't there. Not with my pretty spiel in sight. I would not lose my white heifer for 7 nights' sleep. You will thank me when you find your cow, and all the rest safe in the morning. Good night, dear. And Erica closed the door after her young mistress, and sat down on the bench outside with her face towards the sun, her lure by her side, and her knitting in her hands. She was glad that the herd lay, so that by keeping her eye on them, she could watch that wonder of midsummer night within the Arctic Circle, the dipping of the sun below the horizon to appear again immediately. She had never been far enough to the north to see the sun complete its circle without disappearing at all. But she did not wish it. She thought the softening of the light which she was about to witness, and the speedy renewing of day more wonderful and beautiful. She sat soothed by her employment, and by the tranquility of the scene, and free from fear. She had done her duty by the spirits of the mountain and the wood. And in case of the appearance of any object that she did not like, she could slip into the house in an instant. Her thoughts were therefore wholly Rolf's. She could endure now to contemplate a long life, spent in doing honor to his memory, by the industrious discharge of duty. She would watch over Petter, and receive his last breath in office, which should have been Rolf's. She would see another houseman arrive, and take possession of that house, and become betrothed and marry. And no one, not even her watchful mistress, should see a trace of repining in her countenance, or hear a tone of bitterness from her lips. However weary her heart might be, she would dance at every wedding of fellows event, or of young mistress. She would cloud nobody's happiness, but would do all she could to make Rolf's memory pleasant to those who had known him and wished him well. Her eyes rested on the lovely scene before her from the elevation at which she was. It appeared as if the ocean swelled up into the very sky, so high was the horizon line, and between lay a vast region of rock and river, hill and dale, forest, fjord, and town, part in golden sunlight, part in deep shadow, but although bright as the skies could make it, silent as became the hour. As Erica found that she could glance at the sun itself, without losing sight of the cattle, which still lay within her indirect vision, she carefully watched the descent of the orb, anxious to observe precisely when it should disappear, and how soon its golden spark would kindle up again from the waves when its lower rim was just touching the waters. Its circle seemed to be of an enormous size, and its whole mass to be flaming. Its appearance was very unlike that of the comparatively small, compact, brilliant luminary which rides the sky at noon. Erica was just thinking so when a rustle in the thicket within the pine grove made her involuntarily turn her head in that direction, instantly remembering that it was a common device of the underground people for one of them to make the watcher look away in order that others might drive off the cattle. She resumed her duty and gazed steadfastly at the herd. They were safe, neither reduced to the size of mice, nor wandering off, though she had let her eye glance away from them. The sky, however, did not look itself. There were two suns in it. Now Erica really did quite forget the herd for some time, even her dear white heifer. While she stared bewildered at the spectacle before her eyes, there was one sun, the sun she had always known, half sunk in the sea, while above it hung another, round and complete, somewhat less bright perhaps, but as distinct and plain before her eyes as any object in heaven or earth had ever been. Her work dropped from her hands as she covered her eyes for a moment. She started to her feet and then looked again. It was still there, though the lower sun was almost gone. As she stood gazing, she once more heard the rustle in the wood, though it crossed her mind that the wood-demon was doubtless there, making choice of his axe and his tree. She could not move, and had not even a wish to take refuge in the house, so wonderful was his spectacle. The clearest instance of enchantment she had ever seen. Was it meant for good a token that the coming year was to be a doubly bright one? If not, how was she to understand it? Erica, cried a voice at this moment from the wood, a voice which thrilled her whole frame. My Erica! She not only looked towards the wood now, but sprang forwards, but her eyes were so dazzled by having gazed at the sun that she could see nothing. Then she remembered how many forms the cunning demon could assume, and she turned back, thinking how cruel it was to delude her with her lover's voice, when instead of his form she should doubtless see some horrid monster. She turned in haste, and laid her hand on the latch of the door, glancing once more at the horizon. There was now no sun at all. The burnish was gone from every point of the landscape, and a mild twilight reigned. One good omen had vanished, but there was still enchantment around, for again she heard the thrilling Erica. There was no huge beast glaring through the pine stems and trampling down the thicket, but instead there was the figure of a man advancing from the shadow into the pasture. Why do you take that form? Said the trembling girl, sinking down on the bench. I had rather have seen you as a bear. Did you not find the axe? I laid it for you. Pray come no nearer. I must, my love, to show you that it is your own Rolf. Erica, do not let your superstition come for ever between us. She held out her arms, could not rise, though she strove to do so. Rolf sat beside Hirsch, felt his kisses on her forehead, felt his heart beat, felt that not even a spirit could assume the very tones of that voice. "Do forgive me," she murmured, "but it is Midsummer Eve, and I felt so sure. As sure of my being the demon, as I am sure there is no cruel spirit here, though it is Midsummer Eve. Look, love, see how the day smiles upon us." And he pointed to where a golden star seemed to kindle on the edge of the sea. It was the sun again rising after its few minutes of absence. "I saw too just now," cried Harriet. "Woe, sons, where are we really? And how is all this? And where do you come from?" And she gazed still wistfully, doubtfully, in her lover's face. "I will show you," said he, smiling, and while he still held her with one arm lest in some sudden fancy she should fly him as a ghost, he used the other hand to empty his pockets of the beautiful shells he had brought, tossing them into her lap. "Did you ever see such, Erica? I have been where they lie in heaps. Did you ever see such beauties?" "I never did, Rolf. You have been at the bottom of the sea." And once more she shrank from what she took for the grasp of a drowned man. "Not to the bottom," love replied, he still clasping her hand. "Our Fiord is deep, perhaps as deep as they say. I dived as deep as a man may to come up with the breath in his body. But I could never find the bottom. Did I not tell you that I should go down as far as Vogel Island, and that I should there be safe?" "Yes, you did, you did." "Well, I went to Vogel Island, and here I am safe." "It is you, we are together again," she exclaimed now in full belief. Thank God," and she wept upon his shoulder. They did not heed the time as they talked, and Rolf was just telling how he had more than once seen a double sun, without finding any remarkable consequences follow, when Stiorna came forth with her milk pails, just before 4 o'clock. She started and dropped one of her pails when she saw who was sitting on the bench, and Erica started no less at the thought of how completely she had forgotten the cattle and the underground people. All this time the herd was all safe, however, every cow as large as life, and looking exactly like itself, so that the good fortune of this Midsummer Eve had been perfect. The appearance of Stiorna reminded the lovers that it was time to begin the business of the morning. They startled Stiorna with the news that a large company was coming to breakfast, being in no very amiable temper towards happy lovers. She refused, after a moment's thought, to believe what they said, and sat down sulking to her task of milking. So Rolf proceeded to rouse Jan, and Erica stepped to Frolic's bedside and waked her with a kiss. "Erica, no, can it be?" said the active girl, up in a moment. "You look too happy to be Erica." "Erica never was so happy before, dear. That is the reason you were right, Frolic, bless your kind heart for it. Rolf was not dead, he is here." Frolic gallopaded round the room like one crazy, before proceeding to dress. "Whenever you like to stop," said Erica, laughing. "I have some good news for you too." "I am to go and see the bishop," cried Frolic, clapping her hands and whirling round on one foot like an opera dancer. "Not so, Frolic. There now, you promise me good news, and then you won't let me go and see the bishop when you know that is the only thing in the world I want or wish for. Would it not be a great compliment to you, and save you a great deal of trouble, if the bishop were to come here to see you?" "Ah, that would be a pretty sight, the Bishop of Trondheim over the ankles, in the sodden-trodden pasture, sticking in the mud of Sulitlama. The Bishop of Trondheim, sleeping upon hay in the loft, and eating his dinner off a wooden platter. That would be the most wonderful sight that Nordland ever saw. Prepare then to see the Bishop of Trondheim drink his morning coffee out of a wooden bowl. Meantime, I must go and grind his coffee. Seriously, Frolic, you must make haste to dress, and help the pirates want to carry off the bishop for ransom. Erlingson is raising the country. Hund is coming here as a prisoner, and the bishop and my mistress and Orga to be safe. And if you do not help me, I shall have nothing ready, for Stiorna does not like the news." Never had Frolic dressed more quickly. She thought it very hard that the bishop should see her when she had nothing but her dairy dress to wear. But she was ready all the sooner for this. Erica consoled her with her belief that the bishop was the last person who could be supposed to make a point of a silk gown for a mountain maiden. A consultation about the arrangements was held before the door by the 4 who were in a good humor, for Stiorna remained aloof. This, like other mountain dwellings, was a mere sleeping and eating shed only calculated for a bare shelter at night at meals, and from occasional rain. There was no apartment at the Cedar in which the bishop could hold an audience out of the way of the cooking and other household transactions. It could not be expected of him to sit on the bench outside or on the grass like the people of the establishment, for unaccustomed as he was to spend his days in the open air, his eyes would be blinded, and his face blistered by the sun. The young people cast their eyes on the pine wood as the fittest summer parlor for him, if it could be provided with seats. Erica sprang forward to prevent anyone from entering the wood, till she should have seen what state the place was in on this particular morning. No trees had been felled, and no branches cut since the night before, and the axes remained where they had been hung. The demon had not wanted them, it seemed, and there was no fear of intruding upon him now, so the two young men set to work to raise a semicircular range of turf seats in the pleasantest part of the shady grove. The central seat, which was raised above the rest, and had a footstool, was well cushioned with dry and soft moss, and the rough bark was cut from the trunk of the tree against which it was built, so that the stem served as a comfortable back to the chair. Rolf tried the seat when finished, and as he leaned back, feasting his eyes on the vast sunny landscape, which was to be seen between the trees of the grove, he declared that it was infinitely better to sit here than in the bishop's stall in Trondheim Cathedral. All being done now for which a strong man was wanted, Rolf declared that he and Jan must be gone to the farm. Not a man could be spared from the shores of the Fiord, till the affairs of the pirates should be settled. Erica ought to have expected to hear this, but her cheek grew white as it was told. She spoke no word of objection, however, seeing plainly what her lover's duty was. She turned towards the dairy when he was gone. Instead of indulging herself with watching him down the mountain, she was busy skimming bowl after bowl of rich milk, when Frolic ran in to say that Stiorna had dressed herself and put up her bundle, and was setting forth homewards to see, as she said, the truth of things, there which men of course to learn Hund's condition and prospects. It was now necessary to tell her that she would presently see Hund brought up to the cedar a prisoner, and that the farm was no place for any but fighting men. This day, to save her feelings and temper, Erica asked her to watch the herd, leading them to a point whence she could soonest see the expected company mounting the uplands. It was Hund with his feet tied under his horse, and the bridle held by a man on each side. Presently there were voices heard from the hill above. Some traveller, who had met the budstick, had reported the proceedings below, and the news had spread to a northern cedar. The men had gone down to the Fiord, and here were the women with above a gallon of strawberries fresh gathered, and a score of plovers' eggs. Next appeared a pony coming westward over the pasture laden with panniers containing a tender kid, a packet of spices, a jar of preserved cherries, and a few of the present season early ripe, and a stone bottle of ant vinegar. Frolic's spirits rose higher and higher as more people came from below, sent by Rolf on his way down. A deputation of Lapps came from the tents bringing reindeer venison and half of a fine gamel cheese, before Erica had had time to pour out a glass of corn brandy for each of this dwarfish party in token of thanks, and because it is considered unlucky to send away Lapps without a treat. Other mountain dwellers came with offerings of various wild fowl, so that the dresser was loaded with game enough to feed 100 hungry men. Erica and Frolic returned to their breakfastable to make the new arrangements now necessary, and place the fruit and spices. Erica closely examined the piece of gamel cheese brought by the Lapps, and then with glowing cheeks called Frolic to her. "What now?" said Frolic. "Have you found a way of telling fortunes with the hard cheese, as some pretend to do with the soft curds?" "Look here," said Erica. "What stamp is this?" "The cheese has been scraped almost pared, you see, but they have left one little corner, and whose stamp is there?" "Ours," said Frolic coolly. "This is the cheese you laid out on the ridge last night." "I believe it, I see it," exclaimed Erica. "Now, dear Erica, do not let us have the old story of your being frightened about what the demon will say and do nobody, but you will be surprised that the Lapps help themselves with good things that lie strewing the ground." To Frolic's delight and surprise, she appeared too busier, was rather perhaps too happy to lament this mischance, as she would formerly have done just when a youth from the highest pasture on Sulaitlma had come running and panting to present Frolic with a handful of fringed pinks and blue gentian, plucked from the very edge of the glacier, so that their colors were reflected in the ice. Stiorna appeared in haste to tell that a party on horseback and on foot were winding out of the ravine and coming straight up over the pasture. All was now certainty, and great was the bustle to put out of sight all unseemly tokens of preparation. In the midst of the hurry, Frolic found time to twist some of her pretty flowers into her pretty hair, so that it might easily chance that the bishop would not miss her silk gown. The bishop's reputation preceded him, as is usual in such cases, as his horse followed by those which bore. The ladies reached the house door. All present cried, "Welcome to the mountain, welcome to Sulaitlma." The bishop observed that often as he had wished to look abroad from Sulaitlma, and to see with his own eyes what life at the cedars was like, he should have grown old without the desire being gratified. But for the design of the enemy upon him, it was all he could do to go the rounds of his diocese from station to station, below without thinking of journeys of pleasure, yet here he was on Sulitlma. When he and Roman 1,000 Khalsen and the ladies had dismounted, and were entering the house to breakfast, the gazers found leisure to observe the hindmost of the train of riders. It was Hund with his feet tied under his horse, and the bridle held by a man on each side. He had seen and heard too much of the preparations against the enemy to be allowed to remain below or at large anywhere. Till the attack should be over he could not dismount till someone untied his legs, and no one would do that till a safe place could be found in which to confine him. It was an awkward situation enough sitting there bound before everybody's eyes, and not the less for Stiorna's leaning her head against the horse, and crying at seeing him so treated, and yet Hund had often been seen on small occasions to look far more black and miserable. His face now was almost cheerful. Stiorna praised this as a sign of bravery, but the truth was the party had been met by Rolf and Jan going down the mountain. It was no longer possible to take Rolf for a ghost, and though Hund was as far as possible from understanding the matter, he was unspeakably relieved to find that he had not the death of his rival to answer, for it made his countenance almost gay to think of this even while stared at by men, women, and children as a prisoner. "What is it?" whimpered Stiornahat. "Are you a prisoner for Hund?" "Ask them that know," said Hund. "I thought at first that it was on Rolf's account, and now that they see with their own eyes that Rolf is safe, they best know what they have to bring against me." "It is no secret," said Madame Erlingson. "Hund was seen with the pirates, acting with and assisting them when they committed various acts of thievery on the shores of the Fiord. If the pirates are taken, Hund will be tried with them for robberies at there's Kyrle's tanks and other places along the shore, about which information has been given by a witness." "There's Kyrle's and tanks," repeated Hund to himself. "Then there must be magic in the case. I could have sworn that not an eye on earth witnessed the doings there. If Rolf turns out to be the witness, I shall be certain that he has the powers of the region to help him. So little is robbery to be dreaded at the Cedars, that there really was no place where Hund could be fastened in, no lock upon any doorknot, a window, from which he might not escape. The zealous neighbors, therefore, whose interest it was to detain him, offered to take it in turn to be beside him, his right arm tied to the left of another man, and thus it was settled. When the bishop came forth in the afternoon to take his seat in the shade of the wood, those who were there assembled were singing for Norga instead of permitting them to stop on account of his arrival. He joined in the song solely because his heart was in it, as he looked around him and saw deep shades and sunny uplands, blue glaciers above, green pastures and glittering waters below, and all around herds on every hillside. He felt his love of old Norway and his thankfulness for being one of her sons as warm as that of any one of the singers in the wood. Out of the fullness of his heart, the good bishop addressed his companions on the goodness of God in creating such a land, and placing them in it with their happiness so far in their own hands as that little worthy of being called evil could befall them, except through faults of their own. Roman 1,000 Khalsen, who had before uttered his complaints of the superstition of his flock, hoped that his bishop was now about to attack the mischief vigorously. The bishop only took his seat, mossy seat, prepared for him, and declared himself to be now at the service of any who wished to consult or converse with him, instead of thrusting his own opinions and reproofs upon them, as it was Roman 1,000 Khalsen's wont to do. He waited for the people to open their minds to him in their own way, and by this means, whatever he found occasion to say had double influence from coming naturally. The words dropped by him that day were not forgotten through long years after, and he was quoted half a century after he had been in his grave, as old Ulla had quoted the good bishop of Trondheim of her day. In a few hours, many of the people were gone for the present, some being wanted at home, and others for the expected affair on the Fiord. The bishop and Roman 1,000 Khalsen had thought themselves alone in their shady retreat, when they saw Erica lingering near among the trees. With a kind smile the bishop beckoned to her, and bade her sit down, and tell him whether he had not been right in promising a while ago that God would soothe her sorrows with time, as is the plan of his kind providence. He remembered well the story of the death of her mother. Erica replied that not only had her grief been soothed, but that she was now so blessed that her heart was burdened with its gratitude. "I wish," said Erica, with a sigh, "I do wish I knew what to think about Nipen." "I hear it comes," observed Roman 1,000 Khalsen, folding his arms as if for an argument. Encouraged by the bishop, Erica told the whole story of the last few months, from the night of Otto's prank to that, which found her at the feet of her friend. For she cast herself down at the bishop's feet sitting, as she had done in her childhood, looking up in his face. "You want to know what I think of all this," said the bishop. When she had done, "I think that you could hardly help believing, as you have believed amidst these strange circumstances, and with your mind full of the common accounts of Nipon. Yet I do not believe there is any such spirit as Nipon or any demon in the forest or on the mountain. This is one of the many tales belonging to the old religion of this country. And how did this old religion arise? Why the people saw grand spectacles every day and heard wonders, whichever way they turned. And they supposed that the whole universe was alive. The sun, as it traveled, they thought was alive and kind, and good to men. The tempest they thought was alive, and angry with men. The fire and frost they thought were alive, pleased to make sport with them. As people who ought to know better observed Roman 1000 Kalsen, now think the wind is alive, and call it Nipon, or the mist of the lake and river, which they call the sprite Uldra. It is true, said the bishop, that we now have better knowledge, and see that the earth and all that is in it is made, and moved by one good spirit, who instead of sporting with men, or being angry with them, rules all things for their good. But I am not surprised that some of the old stories remain, and are believed in still and by good and dutiful Christians. Too, the mother sings the old songs over the cradle, and the child hears tell of sprites and demons before it, hears of the good God, who sends forth the snow and rain and vapor and the stormy winds fulfilling his word. And when the child is grown to be a man or woman, the northern lights shooting over the sky, and the sighing of the winds in the pine forest, bring back those old songs and old thoughts about demons and sprites. And the stoutest man trembles. I do not wonder, nor do I blame any man or woman for this, though I wish they were as happy as the weakest infant, or the most worn-out old man, who has learned from the gentle Jesus to fear nothing at any time because his Father was with him. Erica hid her face, ashamed under the good man's smile. In our towns, continued he, much of this blessed change is already wrought. No one in my city of Tronium now fears the angry and cunning Fiord Loke. But every citizen closes his eyes in peace when he hears the midnight cry of the watch. Except the Lord keepeth the city, the watchman waketh. But in vain 6 in the wilds of the country, every man's faith will hereafter be his watchman, crying out upon all that happens. It is the Lord's hand, let him do what seemeth to him good. This might have been said, Erica, as it appears to me at every turn of your story, where you and your friends were not in fault. Oh, exclaimed Erica, dropping her hands from before her glowing face, if I dared but think there were no bad spirits, if I dared only hope that everything that happens is done by God's own hand, I could bear everything. I would never be afraid again. It is what I believe, said the bishop, laying his hand on her head. He continued, we know that the very hairs of your head are all numbered. I see that you are weary of your fears, that you have long been heavy laden with anxiety. It is you then that he invites to trust him, when he says by the lips of Jesus, come ye, that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Rest is what I have wanted, said Erica, while her tears flowed gently. But Peter and Ulla did not believe as you do, and could not explain things, and you should have asked me, said Roman 1000 Kalsen, I could have explained everything. Perhaps so, sir, but Roman 1000 Kalsen, you always seemed angry, and you said you despised us for believing anything that you did not. And it is the most difficult thing in the world to ask questions which one knows will be despised. Roman 1000 Kalsen glanced in the bishop's face to see how he took this, and how he meant to support the pastor's authority. The bishop looked sad and said nothing. And then continued Erica, there were others who laughed at, even Rolf himself laughed, and what one fears becomes only the more terrible when it is laughed at. Very true, said the bishop, when Jesus sat on the well in Samaria, and taught how the true worship was come, he neither frowned on the woman who inquired, nor despised her, nor made light of her superstition about a sacred mountain. There was a long silence, which was broken at last by Erica, asking the bishop whether he could not console poor Hund, who wanted comfort more than she had ever done. The bishop replied that the demons who most tormented poor Hund were not abroad on the earth or in the air, but within his breast thighs. Remorse, his envy, his covetousness, his fear. He meant not to lose sight of poor Hund, either in the prison to which he was to travel tomorrow, or after he should come out of it. Here Frolic appeared, running to ask whether those who were in the grove would not like to look forth from the ridge, and see what good the budstick had done, and how many parties were on their way from all quarters to the farm. Roman 1000 Coulson was glad to rise and escape from what he thought a schooling, and the bishop himself was as interested in what was going on as if the farm had been his home. He was actually the first at the ridge. This part of the mountain was a singularly favorable situation for seeing what was doing on the spot on which everyone's attention was fixed this day. While the people on the Fiord could not see what was going forward at Saltdalen, nor those at Saltdalen, what were the movements at the farm, the watchers on the ridge could observe the proceedings at all the 3 points. The opportunity was much improved by the bishop having a glass of a quality so rare at that time that there would probably have been some talk of magic and charms if it had been seen in any hands but the bishop's. By means of this glass, the Bishop Roman 1000 Coulson, or Madame Erlingson, announced from time to time what was doing as the evening advanced, how parties of 2 or 3 were leaving Saltdalen creeping towards the farm under cover of rising grounds, rocks, and pine woods, how small companies well armed were hidden in every place of concealment near Erlingson's, and how there seemed to be a great number of women about the place. This was puzzling who these women could be, and why they should choose to resort to the farm when its female inhabitants had left it for safety. It was difficult at first to imagine, but the truth soon occurred to Frolic, no doubt. Someone had remembered how strange and suspicious it would appear to the pirates, who supposed the bishop to be at the farm, that there should be no women in the company assembled to meet him. No doubt these people in blue, white, and green petticoats who were striding about the yards and looking forth from the galleries were men dressed in their wives' clothes, or in such as Erlingson furnished from the family chests. This disguise was as good as an ambush, while it also served to give the place the festive appearance looked for by the enemy. It was found afterwards that Otto had acted as latest maid, fitting the gowns to the shortest men, and dressing up their heads, so as best to hide the shaggy hair. Great numbers were certainly assembled before night, yet still a little group might be seen now and then winding down from some recess of the widespreading mountain, making circuits by the ravines and watercourses, so as to avoid crossing the upland slopes, which the pirates might be surveying by means of such a glass as the bishop's. The bishop was of opinion that scarcely a blow would be struck, so great was the country force compared with that of the pirates. He believed that the enemy would be overpowered and disarmed almost without a struggle. Erica, who could not but tremble with fear as well as expectation, blessed his words in her heart, and so in truth did every woman present. No one thought of going to rest, though Madame Erlingson urged it upon those over whom she had influence, finding that Erica had sat up to watch the cattle the night before she compelled her to go and lie down, but no compulsion could make her sleep, and Orga and Frolic did the best they could for her by running to her with news of any fresh appearance below. Just after midnight, they brought her word that the bishop had ordered every one but Roman 1000 Coulson away from the ridge. The schooner had peeped out from behind the promontory and was stealing up with a soft west wind. The girls went on to describe how the schooner was working up, and why the bishop thought that the people at the farm were aware of every inch of her progress. Erica sprang from the bed and joined the group who were sitting on the grass awaiting the sunrise and eagerly listening for every word from their watchman. The bishop, he told, when he saw 2 boats full of men put off from the schooner and creep towards Erlingson's Cove, under the shadow of the rocks. He told how the country people immediately gathered behind the barn and the house and every outbuilding, and at length when the boats touched the shore he said, "Now come and look yourselves, they are too busy now to be observing us." Then how eyes were strained, and what silence there was broken only by an occasional exclamation, as it became certain that the decisive moment was come. The glass passed rapidly from hand to hand, but it revealed little. There was smoke covering a struggling crowd, and such gazers as had a husband, a father, or a lover, there could look no longer. The bishop himself did not attempt to comfort them at a moment when he knew it would be in vain. In the midst of all this, someone observed 2 boats appearing from behind the promontory and making directly and rapidly for the schooner. And presently there was a little smoke there too, only a puff or two. And then all was quiet till she began to hang out her sails, which had been taken in, and to glide over the waters in the direction of a small sandy beach on which she ran straight up, till she was evidently fast grounded. "Excellent," exclaimed Roman 1000 Coulson, "how admirably they are conducting the whole affair. The retreat of these fellows is completely cut off, their vessel taken and driven ashore while they are busy elsewhere." "That is Otto's doings," observed Orga quietly. Otto's doings, how do you know? Are you serious? Can you see or did you hear? I was by when Otto told his plan to my father, and begged to be allowed to take the schooner. My father laughed, so that I thought Otto would be for going over to the enemy. No fear of that, said Erica. Otto has a brave, faithful heart. And said his mistress, a conscience and temper which will keep him meek and patient, till he has atoned for mischief that he thinks he has done. I must see more of this boy, observed the bishop. Did your father grant his request? He inquired of Orga. At last, he Roman 999 Otto said that a young boy could do little good in the fight at the farm, but that he might lead a party to attack the schooner, in the absence of almost all her crew. He said it was no more than a boy might do with half a dozen lads, to help him, for he had reason to feel sure that only just hands enough to manage her would be left on board, and those the weakest of the pirate party. My father said there were men to spare, and he put 12 well-armed under Otto's orders. Who would submit to be under Otto's command? Asked Frolic, laughing at the idea. Twice 12, if he had wanted so many, replied Orga. Between the goodness of the joke and their zeal, there were volunteers in plenty. Me father told me, as he was putting me on my horse. In a very few minutes, all signs of fighting were over at the farm, but there was a fire. The barn was seen to smoke, and then to flame. It was plain that the neighbors were at liberty to attend to the fire, and had no fighting on their hands. They were seen to form a line from the burning barn to the brink of the water, and to hand buckets till the fire was out. The barn had been nearly empty, and the fire did not spread farther, so that Madame Erlingson herself did not spend one grudging thought on the small sacrifice in return for their deliverance from the enemy who she had feared would ransack her dwelling and fire it over her children's heads. She was satisfied and thankful if indeed the pirates were taken. At the bishop's question about who would go down the mountain for news, each of Hun's guards begged to be the man. The swiftest of foot was chosen, and off he went, not without a barley cake and brand a flask at a pace, which promised speedy tidings. As Madame Erlingson hoped in her heart, he met a messenger dispatched by her husband, so that all who had lain down to sleep, all but herself, that is, were greeted by good news. As they appeared at the breakfastable, the pirates were all taken, and on their way bound to Saltdalen, there to be examined by the magistrate, and no doubt thence transferred to the jail at Trondhjem. Hund was to follow immediately, either to take his trial with them, or to appear as evidence against them. One of the pirates was wounded, and 2 of the country people, but not a life was lost, and Erlingson, Rolf, Petter, and Otto were all safe and unhurt. Otto was superintending the unlading of the schooner, and was appointed by the magistrate at his master's desire head guard of the property, as it lay on the beach, till the necessary evidence of its having been stolen by the pirates was taken, and the owners could be permitted to identify and resume their property. Otto was certainly the greatest man concerned in the affair after Erlingson. When it was finished, and he returned to his home, he found he cared more for the pressure of his grandfather's hand upon his head, as the old man blessed his boy, than for all the praises of the whole country round. An idea occurred to everybody but one within the next few hours, which occasioned some consultation. Everybody but Erica felt, and said that it would be a great honor and privilege, but one not undeserved by the district, for the Bishop of Trondhjem to marry Rolf and Erica before he left Nordland. The bishop wished to make some acknowledgement for the zealous protection and hospitality which had been afforded him, and he soon found that no act would be so generally acceptable as his blessing the union of these young people. He spoke to Madame Erlingson about it, and her only doubt was whether it was not too soon after the burial of old Ulla. If Petter, however, should not object on this ground, no one else had a right to do so. So far from objecting, Petter shed tears of pleasure at the thought. He was sure Ulla would be delighted, if she knew, would feel it an honor to herself, that her place should be filled by one whose marriage crown should be blessed by the bishop himself. Erica was startled, and had several good reasons to give why there should be no hurry, but she was brought round to see that Rolf could go to Trondhjem to give his evidence against the pirates even better after his marriage than before, because he would leave Petter in a condition of greater comfort, and she even smiled to herself as she thought how rapidly she might improve the appearance of the house during his absence, so that he should delight in it on his return, when the bishop assured her that she should not be hurried into her marriage within 2 days, but that he would appoint a day, an hour, when he should be at the distant church, to confirm the young people resident lower down the Fiord. She gratefully consented, wondering at the interest so high and revered a man seemed to feel in her lot. When it was once settled that the wedding was to be next week, she gave hearty aid to the preparations, as freely and openly as if she was not herself to be the bride. The bishop embarked immediately on descending the mountain. His considerate eye saw at a glance that there was necessarily much confusion at the farm, and that his further presence would be an inconvenience, so he bade his host and the neighbors farewell for a short time, desiring them not to fail to meet him again at the church on his summons. The kindness of the neighbors did not cease when danger from the enemy was over. Some offered boats for the wedding procession. Several sent gilt paper to adorn the bridal crown which Olga and Frolic were making, and some yielded a more important assistance still. They put trusty persons into the cedar and over the herd for 2 days, so that all Erlingson's household might be at the wedding. Stiorna preferred making butter and gazing southwards to attending the wedding of Hun's rival. But everyone else was glad to go. Nobody would have thought of urging Petter's presence, but he chose to do his part, a part which no one could discharge so well, singing bridal songs in the leading boat. The summons arrived quite as soon as it could have been looked for, and the next day there was as pretty a boat procession on the still waters of the Fiord as had ever before glided over its surface. Within the memory of man, no bride had been prettier, no crown more glitter ring, no bridegroom more happy, no chanting was ever more soothing than old Petter's, no clarionet better played than Audace, no bridesmaids more gay and kindly than Olga and Frolic. The neighbors were hearty in their cheers as the boats put off, and the cheers were repeated from every settlement in the coves and on the heights of the Fiord, and were again taken up by the echoes, till the summer air seemed to be full of gladness. To conclude, the bishop was punctual and kindly in his welcome of Erica to the altar. He was also graciously pleased with Rolf's explanation that he had not ventured to bring a gift for so great a dignitary, but that he hoped the bishop would approve of his giving his humble offering to the church instead. The 6 sides of the new pulpit were nearly finished now, and Rolf desired to take upon himself the carving of the basement as his marriage fee. As the bishop smiled approbation, Roman 1000 Carlsen bowed acquiescence, and Rolf found himself in prospect of indoor work for some time to come. Erica carried home in her heart, and kept there for ever certain words of the bishop's address, which he uttered with his eye kindly fixed upon hers. Go, and abide under the shadow of the Almighty. So shall you not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. When you shall have made the Lord your habitation, you shall not fear that evil may befall you, or that any plague shall come nigh your dwelling. Go, and peace be on your house. The Temple Press, Printers, Letchworth,